Patriarchy's awesome.
I know this is hard and offensive or whatever, or triggers you or whatever to hear it, but right now, society is oriented around high IQ workers tend to earn more money.
I guess I would too. I don't think that nurses have a higher IQ than electricians do.
Seems like electricians are some of the highest IQ tradesmen, and their IQ is around 110, and it looks like nurses are like 116 to 120. So even electricians, which are the highest IQ of the tradesmen, it seems like nurses are higher.
Yeah. There you go. There's a chart right there.
They're just told to go outside and
So
run
it's
it off.
intuitive?
Nothing about what I just said was intuitive.
It is intuitive. The only reason that you're
you have
expressing...
nothing to say. You're not even engaging.
I'm literally giving you a counter argument.
Giving
you a counter argument.
Can you tell me what I just
said? Don't cut me off. Let me give you the counter argument.
Can you tell me what I just said first? That's not an anecdote.
Those examples were anecdotal.
No, they were examples for how to deal. That's not an anecdote. An anecdote is a story that's happened in the past. A hypothetical example
Which is what you just gave me was two stories that happened in the past.
That's not an anecdote. If I say,
you just described it as being one.
No, if I say, hey, how can I help? How can I discipline a student in the class? You go, well, you could give the student detention if he misbehaves. You go,
sure.
Oh, well, that's an anecdote. That's not an anecdote. Do you know what an anecdote is?
So we have a pretty epic lineup for you today. We got Destiny, Michael Sartain, Andrew from the Crucible, Angela Knight, and Malek is going to be coming in a few minutes. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting debate. So the topic that most of you guys picked that you want to see this debate is patriarchy bad for men and women? The second topic that we will probably discuss will either be the male depression one or evolutionary psychology.
I do believe that the patriarchy has done its job. I don't believe that it's necessary for men or for women anymore. I believe that we live in a society. Oh, what's up, Malek? I do believe that the society that we live in now, it's just moving forward, and I think that we do need to focus on the evolution of men and women. So I don't really know how referring back to a blueprint that worked in the 1950s is going to be something that we can just, I don't know, progress. That's just me. So yeah.
Malek, let me really quickly explain to you. So the proposition we're discussing is patriarchy good or bad for men and women. So you can think it's good for men, bad for women. You can think it's bad for both. And we're just doing quick opening statements, about 1 or 2 minutes. And then after that, it's going to be open panel. You guys are going to go at it. And in an hour, I will introduce a different topic. All right, Andrew.
Yeah, I think the patriarchy is awesome. It's good for men and women. It's also necessary. So it's a logical necessity. In order to maintain society, you have to use force. It doesn't matter if you're maintaining it at the law enforcement level or you're protecting it with the military. Men are the only ones really who are going to be able to maintain that force. Whether people want to believe that or not, it's true. And so, yes, patriarchy is not only necessary, but it's always going to be the default on every society everywhere on planet Earth at all times. There's really not anything you're going to be able to do about it. No matter how much you push towards egalitarianism, it's still going to end up being patriarchal. And that's kind of a descriptive is. So it depends on how people want to define patriarchy. But from my perspective, yeah, I think patriarchy is not only good, but necessary.
Okay, cool. Michael, you are up next.
Yeah, like Andrew said, it depends on how we define it. If it is the idea that men are going to take roles that require more physical strength or more assertiveness, then yes, by default, we're just going to be living in a patriarchy. If patriarchy means that there is a nefarious attempt specifically just to keep women down for the sake of keeping women down, I don't necessarily agree with that to the same extent. But if there is a patriarchy, one of the main victims of the patriarchy are going to be men who suffer from depression more, who commit suicide more, who die from accidents more. In those type of situations. So I actually think if there is a patriarchy, the victims of the patriarchy are, or the biggest victims of the patriarchy are low status men, whereas you'll have some women who are at the bottom who can marry their way out of the caste system that they're in, at whatever socioeconomic group they're in. Those men at the bottom rungs cannot. So that would be my argument in that case.
Yeah, Michael brought up a good point, is we all need to be kind of agreed in the definition of patriarchy. So just quickly Google this. We're going off Cambridge. A form of social organization in which fathers or other males, so males, control the family, tribe, or larger social unit, which would involve the government or society organized in this way. So that's kind of the general definition that I think we should work with. So basically, yeah, so that's kind of the gist of it. All right, anyway, I think next is Destiny.
Yeah, when you come to like really broad forms of societal organization, I think it's hard to say if it's like good or bad. There's definitely negative aspects to patriarchy. There's definitely positive aspects to patriarchy. I think that where we're at right now socially, I think it's kind of run its course. I don't think there's as many huge benefits to be seen for having like such a strict hierarchy on like men over women, especially as women continue to achieve highly in places like education and now increasingly more in the work environment. So I think we're probably ready for the next form of social organization that isn't strictly built around male hierarchy over female.
All right, Malek, you are up.
So I think women are worse at doing basically everything that men also can do. I think patriarchy is W's in chat. I think men are meant to be rulers and women are meant to be supporters and nurturers.
All
I'm
right.
sexist.
Malek.
Malek. Nice.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting combination, Andrew and Malek. All right, so now we're getting to the open panel part, so you guys can just go at it. I will make sure the debate doesn't devolve or get too sidetracked, but it's going to be just you guys. So kick it off, whoever wants to.
So go ahead, Andrew.
No, you can go ahead.
So one of the things that gets really annoying, and I know we have to do this on YouTube because we're trying to get views or whatever, but it's the idea of like, what is a high status man? And then the definition is so incredibly vague. We spend half an hour trying to figure out what that term means. It's the same kind of situation here. Like when I hear people complaining about a patriarchy, what I'm hearing is I am a victim because there is a nefarious attempt by men specifically to keep other people down. And so when I hear that, that is not the same definition as what I saw with that dictionary definition that Alex just read, which is the idea that, yes, men have 17 times as much testosterone genetically, heritably than women do. And so because of that, they're going to have bigger, stronger joints and muscles. They're going to be more aggressive. They're going to be the ones protecting the tribe, building the buildings. They're going to be the ones protecting the tribe from predators. They're going to be the ones out there procuring the resources. And so because of that, we're going to have a patriarchy by default. If the idea is like, for instance, that Barbie movie where the patriarchy is this basically this mechanism by which to keep all women down in every single case, I don't agree with that, and therefore those are two different discussions we're having. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I think it's important. So the definition I think we should work with is a system where the man is in charge of the family, social institutions, and ultimately the government, where men have control in that. Now, whether it's something that's like through force where women can't get in, I think that doesn't happen in reality right now. So there's no point even getting into that. But it's a system that's basically dominated by men. That's essentially the crux of it.
Yeah, I think the issue is that when we talk about like differences in testosterone and ability to defend people from like violence, these are like the least important things that exist in society today. Probably things like IQ or your ability to do well in school or work certain types of jobs are becoming increasingly more important. And these are arenas where women are at parity or slightly better or slightly worse, depending what we're talking about, with men in a lot of different circumstances. So the idea of building all of our society and our hierarchies around who can kill who with their bare fists probably is a very relevant or effective in organizing society today.
Yeah, but Destiny, you would agree that we have to have an enforcement arm which enforces the laws of the nation, and that men are going to be the default for that enforcement arm. Basically, at all times.
No, that's not even remotely true, no.
It is true.
It's not.
Okay, but demonstrate how it's not.
Can a judge be a woman?
Yeah, judges aren't the enforcement arm. The enforcement arm are the people who are going to be out there enforcing the law.
Okay, so judges are absolutely part of our enforcement. It's part of our criminal justice system. But you're saying that just the cops themselves might have to be men?
Let's back up. Let's back up. What does a judge enforce? So a judge will lay down, their judgment, but they're not enforcing the judgment themselves. Other people are doing that enforcement for them, right?
Okay, so if you're saying that at the end of the day, the people that apply physical violence might have to be men, if at the very end of that chain, then we can say that, but I still wouldn't organize an entire society around that.
Yeah, but it's going to be a necessity that society is organized around that.
Why would it be? Why would we organize all of our society around one of the least important parts of our society?
That is about the most important part is the enforcement and defense of your society. I can't think of a more important part of society than the enforcement of its laws and the defense of its people. Can you?
I think that is a bare minimum threat. That's like saying the most important part of society is like access to food or water. I mean, while it's technically true, that's not what's separating out like the great societies from the middling ones. Right. Well, I think that solving, like enforcing crime is not a very complex problem. Now, solving the conditions for crime is complex, but just the enforcement mechanisms for, I guess, arresting people or holding people in prison is not the most pressing or important part of a country today.
Wait a second. The things which give nations the greatest amount of stability, especially as if they're a nation of laws and a nation of law and order, I would say that that's a pivotal, fundamental foundation for your nation to thrive. Like Somalia is not doing so hot, right? Places without law and order aren't doing so hot. Okay, so let's think of like... Hang on, let me finish, and then I'll kick it back over. Same thing with the military. One of the reasons we're one of the most powerful nations on planet Earth and have such security is because we have such a massive national defense system. And yes, I think enforcement is pivotal to all societies everywhere at all times, regardless of their technology level or not.
If you're comparing like what country is more successful, Germany, France, the UK, Norway, Sweden, the United States, Canada, at any point in this conversation, is the enforcement mechanism for cracking people on the street ever entering the conversation?
Well, it's assumed. So these are baseline assumptions. So just because we assume that this is already kind of baked into the pie, so therefore we're not talking about it, doesn't mean that it's not one of the most important fundamentals to that
That's
society.
what I mean. It's important, but it's fundamental and largely solved. That's not going to be, just like I said, for food and water. No one's going to say France is better than Germany because less people are starving to death. That's an assumed thing. That, like, things like distribution of food and water in most first world countries and a lot of third world countries has largely been figured out. So these aren't the things that we ought to be focusing on these days.
But I think that they are, because when those enforcement mechanisms begin to break down, like we saw with the BLM riots and things like this, society itself begins to shake apart at its core. So I do think that it is important that we do start to look at these things as these systems begin to break down. I mean, you were kind of on the forefront, for instance, with, I don't even know if I can say the name on YouTube, right? But with the whole thing that happened with the three guys and the dude with the AR, right? You were on the forefront of that.
Can I say Rittenhouse on YouTube?
I don't know if you can or you can't. I don't know what you can say on YouTube.
You can say whatever you want on my channel.
Okay. So anyway, on the Rittenhouse thing, you were kind of at the forefront of that. You understand that in a nation of laws, when you have a breakdown of law and therefore enforcement, that defaults back to something that's more primitive, which then becomes males who are enforcing whatever their own law is. I mean, so I think that this is something that is pivotal, and it is happening in society, and that's another helpful case for why the patriarchy is good.
I think Sartain wanted to say something, so let's just make sure he gets a chance to say it.
So there are multiple facets, right? So if you take like a hierarchy of needs, if society is running properly, you don't need as much law enforcement. Like I had a buddy of mine say, laws are only, as Bradley, he was saying, laws are for people. If you have a society full of nothing but good men, you don't need laws. But the problem is, like, for instance, if I live and I have a nice day and all the thing I'm worried about is like buying a gift for my wife or taking my dog out to the park, and then all of a sudden somebody starts choking me, the most important thing in the world becomes air, right? Now, all of a sudden my priorities change to survival. I think Andrew's correct. If we get to a point where things break down, it's like, are the men who conduct the violence the most important parts of society? When you're Ukraine and Russia invades, then they become the most important part of society. During other parts of time, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But my point is, I just so we can, play devil's advocate here, Destiny, let's just say that you're right, that it's the least important part of society. The testosterone argument was that men are going to be more assertive, and therefore, because they're going to be more assertive, they're going to have roles in, like, say, politics, as executives at different companies. They're just going to have those roles more. Like, I was in the U.S. military, and we tried to get as many female pilots in the U.S. military as possible. It was definitely an organized effort to do so, and there were still 8 or 9 times as many men as women pilot applicants, because men in those fields just had the proclivity to want to do those things. So that was my argument before, instead of saying, well, men are only there to just conduct violence. Men are also just more assertive and want jobs that deal with, like, problem solving as far as construction. Unless you think that that's not the case, that like maybe women would take those jobs if things were more egalitarian. I think men are more interested in being politicians. They're more interested in being firefighters. They're more interested in being construction workers. They're more interested in being in the infantry than women are.
I think in the most egalitarian society where everything has been 100% socially equalized, I think you'd probably still see a pretty big difference between the types of jobs that men and women choose. I wouldn't deny that. I don't know if I would consider that patriarchy at that point. But I mean,
which goes back to my original argument. I don't think that's patriarchy. I think men being more assertive is just a function that leads to a society that we're in now. and it's not good or bad. It's just the way that it is, because we had two genders in the species, and one of the genders had to compete and had to protect the other gender, and therefore that's why we're bigger and stronger, and that's why we tend to be more assertive in our different roles.
Yeah, and that could potentially be true. But I think the difference is that, like, do we have a society, like Michael says, where men just gravitate towards different jobs as women do, or do we have a society that Andrew wants where it's like women aren't allowed to go to school or something? You know, like, I think that's the difference in degree.
Wait. When did I say that?
Aren't you opposed to, I thought we had a debate once. Aren't you opposed to women having a college education?
No.
Okay, I'm mixing up with someone else then. Okay.
No,
but some people,
not only, hang on.
I think that was Nick.
And kind of the other thing to push back on,
that was Nick.
On that, so that you know, women have always traditionally done, since they've been allowed to go into education, they've always outperformed men. Always. They've always outperformed men from the educational standpoint. This has always been the case. At the college level and even pre-college level, they've always outperformed men. The reason for this is because it's more conducive for women. That type of setting's more conducive. There's far less rough play. There's far less, of this type of thing. But they pretty much always outperform men. So that's I'm kind of giving you that. But also, just so that you understand, and I kind of take issue with what Michael's saying here. What I'm talking about is a foundational level. So I'm saying there's an equalization of force which does not exist. So egalitarianism in itself, I think, is false anyway, because there is no such thing as an equalization of force between men and women. I think that necessarily you're always going to have patriarchy in one form or another, regardless of how much you try to push towards egalitarianism, because it's impossible not to, because of that equalization of force differential. And that equalization of force differential is so wide that a small core of men can basically overrule a large body of women, but the opposite can never be true.
I want to also let Angela and Malek get their words in, because they haven't literally said anything the whole debate. So, let's just go with you, Angela.
My biggest issue with Andrew saying that we can't be in an egalitarian society, I think I guess, like, if you want to go off of like what you only know, saying that, men have always worked hard, they've been the laborers of America. But I think that if you look at the stats now, that men are no longer working and going to school. So I'm really curious as to how it can't be an egalitarian society if they're not putting in the work that they used to.
Well,
exactly
because it necessarily can't actually be equal, because there's no equalization of force. Women will always have to depend on men to enforce their rights, and they'll always have to depend on men to enforce their well-being. They'll always have to depend on men to make the enforcement for all of the things that they want and desire for themselves. They can't enforce those things on their own. They need men to enforce them for them. And men do not need women to enforce their own rights. They do not need women to enforce their own agendas. They don't need women for any of that, but women necessarily need men to do that for them.
Could I say it like this, maybe, Andrew? At the core fundamental, the basis of society, you need men willing to do violence in order to protect the rights of other people.
Well, it's not just that, though. So I want to be very clear with this. It's not just that you need to have aggressive men who are willing to conduct violence in order to keep a society together. It's that fundamentally, women must depend on men to enforce their rights, period.
Got it.
Period. They have to. So egalitarianism, I think, even as a proposition, is false. I don't even think it's possible. I think from a foundational level, it's always going to be patriarchal due to this gap. And philosophers have talked about this for, basically 1,000 years. So have biblical theologians. And it's one of the huge gaps when you're talking about egalitarianism. How, for instance, Angela, how do you enforce your own personal rights absent men? Absent men collectively assisting you in doing that? How would you do that?
Well, I guess, like, in what state are we living in that we constantly need men to enforce?
Anywhere you want. Any imaginary place that you even can think of.
I'm living in America with this great citizenship that I have. I don't have to constantly live in fear that someone needs to enforce my rights. I'm living happily fine. So I'm just curious. So we continuously go back to that, and we say that men need to be there to protect us from what? Other men? Like, yes. So is the issue is like other men beating on other men? So this goes back to like a men's issue.
Yes. So men give women rights and men give other men rights. That's correct. So because they're the enforcement arm, they are going to be the people who deliver rights to women, or take rights away from women, or deliver rights to men, or take rights away from men. So men are always going to be the dominants in force, and so therefore they're always going to be the decider of who gets the rights.
So
can you think of an alternative system?
I'm sorry. So why are men failing in this current society then? If
they're not failing.
they're so failing.
How are they failing?
Yeah, but you just said you were safe, Angela, so I don't know that they're failing, right? I don't know if that's...
It's just right now, we like the way that society works, we have a whole, like, it's men don't do anything. It's the massive institutions that we've created around our countries that ensure rights. You don't get rights from men. You get rights from the protections that the institutions of government have guaranteed you, right? There are men in all sorts of different countries, but the rights that women have afforded to them dramatically vary from country to country, regardless of what man is going to protect them. You know, you might have the strongest male defender ever in Afghanistan, but it doesn't mean you're going to college if you're a woman there. And also, just when you compare country to country and you're looking for like what are the most successful countries, it's not the ones with the most alpha men or the most manly men protecting the rights. It's generally you're looking for things like, do women have access to birth control, and are they participating in the economy? So I don't know. It's just like, it's a very crude argument.
Well, there's a bunch of things that are kind of smuggled in there, right?
Okay.
So the first thing is kind of smuggled in is you talk about institutions being the protectors of rights. Institutions are just a coalition of people, individuals. They're going to rely on the enforcement arm also of men. You say it's not masculine men who are defending these rights. However, it is masculine men who are in the military, in law enforcement, things like this, who are the enforcement arm of these rights, who these government institutions rely heavily on in order to enforce what their will is.
So does that mean,
I'm
just curious on that,
to enforcement.
Do you think then that the countries where women have the most rights are the countries with the most masculine, strong men?
So they're not mutually exclusive or non.
I didn't say they're mutually exclusive. I'm asking because you make it sound like it's just strong men that grant rights. So does that mean that if I were to look at all the women's rights in the world, are the women's...
There's a problem there. There's a smuggle in again where you say strong masculine men are the only ones doing them. Just saying men as the default are the ones who are doing this.
Wait, but why you say men are the default? Like, we can run that back a little bit more reductively. Shouldn't it be 6 feet or taller men? Like, don't all men that are 5'8" and lower get their rights from men that are 6 feet and taller?
No.
Why not?
Because they don't have a non-equalization on force. A 5'8" person can defend themselves against a 6 foot person.
In general, do you think that's true?
I think that there are some advantages, but if you're going to do that, then on average...
No, not some advantages. I'm saying on average, if we look at combat sports with no weight classes, you think 5'8" men are defending themselves from 6 foot?
Well, hang on. So if we're going to use averages, then let's use averages and say that we have an average for a reason, because most men are inside of that average, right? So if that's true, then most of the men who would be falling in these jobs are going to be within that average. Definitely.
Sure, but I'm just asking if we run this all the way back. So any man that's below the average height, any man that's 5'9" or lower, their rights are also being defended by men that are 6'2" and taller.
Well, no, that wouldn't be a direct correlate for equalization, because
Why
men
not?
who are 6 foot, there's far fewer of them than men who are in the average aggregate. So therefore, the force equalization is different. However, if you're looking at the force differential from men to women, the average is so lopsided that even weak men can generally defend themselves fairly well against strong women.
If you want to do force equalization there, then shouldn't we be looking at people that prefer a heavily patriarchal society versus people that prefer a more egalitarian one? And the force equalization for women on the egalitarian one would be probably that most men would side with that over the ones that want the heavily patriarchal one?
Yeah, but that would go with my point, which is that men are the ones who are the rights givers.
But men aren't just the rights givers there, because a coalition of 5'9" and shorter men with women are probably going to defend rights more than a coalition of 6 foot plus alpha men.
But the distinction there is that you said it yourself, it would be a coalition of men and women, but it'll never be women. So it'll
never be 5'8" and lower men, I don't think, right?
No, it will always be. The default will always go to men. Men can always enforce their rights.
So you just want to arbitrarily cut it off at just men, but not go into any of the delineations within
I just went into every
men
delineation with you. Which one would you like to go into?
I mean, I already said it. I think that you could argue that like taller men are the ones that run society, and shorter men only exist in society essentially at the behest of larger men, basically.
Yeah, but we just covered this. That's true. You could say that, but if you're looking at an average, then you're saying that the men who are outside of the average are fewer in number than the men who are in the average. So they're outnumbered. So I don't know what your point is.
I mean, it could be the slightly taller men could probably take on 1.5 shorter men. I'm sure we could find some average where 30% of men in society can run the other 70%. It's just like nobody looks at...
men.
Yeah, I think...
And it's still men.
Sure. Yeah, it is men, but now I'm going into height. But you want to go back on just the man, the fact that it's like the man thing. But again, and to go very broad, because now, I mean, I feel like we kind of see how ridiculous the argument is, and just like saying just men. Like,
I haven't heard you refute it.
Broadly speaking, right, it's hard to refute because it's almost unfalsifiable, because you're talking about half the population of the planet, right? Like, how am I supposed to refute that men are important in guarding rights? There are no countries that exist without men. But when I try to think of like, well, what's the refutation of this? Here would be an interesting thing. Do the countries with the strongest men have the most rights? Not really, no. In fact, just the opposite. I remember hearing so many jokes about how because Russia is so masculine and manly that all the trans Ukrainian soldiers were going to be getting murdered by the brave Russian soldiers. And here we've got drone operators, tossing grenades on Russian troops blowing themselves, right? So it doesn't seem to be the case that like just strong men are a good predictor of rights in any country.
So hang on, wait a second.
Go for it.
So men can take your rights away in those other countries too?
No, not just men. Those countries can take your rights away. You need a whole institution.
Using the enforcement arm of who? Which sex do you think's the enforcement
countries
arm?
are powered by men and women. When the Soviet Union beat Nazi Germany, when the Soviet, it's not just about the enforcement arm. Who's giving them the arms to enforce?
Usually other men.
Who manufactures the guns? Who manufactures
the men?
Okay,
do you think that there's female gun makers all over the world?
Yeah, who do you think was working production in World War II when all of our men were going overseas?
They weren't designing the guns. They were literally on an assembly line putting a fucking screw in a fucking piece of metal. They weren't designing weapons.
That's great, and at the end of the day, both jobs matter. You could be the best engineer in the world. If you don't have somebody building your shit, it doesn't fucking matter, right?
Yeah, that's nice. Women can be a labor force if men allow them to. That's fantastic.
And what I'm saying, you can say if men allow them to, however you want to say it or whatever, but the reality is at the end of the day, it's not just men, right? You need both halves of society working together to actually fucking accomplish anything. There is no society or country that's
smuggling. You're smuggling in just men. Again, you're smuggling in just men. What I'm saying to you specifically is that men are the enforcement arm, and nobody's building shit if men say no. That's what I'm saying. Women aren't going to be able to go to men and say, no, you know what? We're going to do it anyway if men don't want them to, Destiny. That's the distinction.
Well, I disagree with what you're saying because I understand what you're saying. It sounds great on paper, but if we, again, look at the stats right now, the suicide rates are up. Men are dying. Men aren't going to school. They've dropped out of school during COVID.
Yeah, but hold on, Angela. The point of the patriarchy wasn't to just do the point of the what are you saying? The patriarchy. It wasn't that all men do better. Because I've heard this argument before. Yes, men are going to commit suicide more because there's men at the bottom of society that are not benefiting from this patriarchy. Right? Does that make sense? So I've heard the argument before, but like the idea that men are suffering isn't really the reason why the patriarchy isn't working. It's like the point he's trying to make is Andrew's guys, tell me if I'm wrong here. Andrew's trying to say that the foundation of society, there are men who have to enforce and to take certain jobs that have to do with military, law enforcement, etc. And what Destiny is saying is that while that is a part of society and probably a more important part of society in the past, today it's a less important society because we have technology, because we have, someone who's a computer programmer, doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman, people can be successful entrepreneurs and be men or women. And I totally understand both parts of those. But my issue, the initial thing that I was saying before was that because men generally are more aggressive, they're going to fill more parts of those society. More parts of that society, being entrepreneurs, being CEOs of companies, being in the U.S. military, being bodyguards, and stuff like that. So,
yeah. So
go ahead, Angela. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I hear everything you guys are saying, but this all sounds like it's just like labor force jobs. But meanwhile, like the society is thriving off of multiple things that doesn't require you to just be like a fucking barbarian. So I don't understand why we continue to go back to the state of mind.
Because both things are important. Because both things are
important, but it's completely just highlighted in the fact that it's only men. But if you really look at it, women are thriving in it. Women are working more. 7.2 million men aren't working. So what are those men doing that they're contributing to the patriarchy that's so important that men can't enforce those guys who aren't working, who aren't doing shit? So I'm confused.
Wait a second. Women are only able to work in modernity the way that they are because men maintain the entirety of the infrastructure inside of every single nation on the planet. Women do not maintain infrastructure. Their top jobs are teaching, serving, things like this. They don't work in infrastructure. They don't work in paving the roads. They don't work with the air conditioners. They don't work with the electricity. They don't work with any of these things. At a very low scale do they work in any of these industries. The scales are so lopsided that you almost can just take the women out because they're so irrelevant to most of these industries. So the thing is I got to ask you, like, you say women are doing all these great things. It's like they're all enabled by the patriarchal system, which literally has men competing with men, which we're supposed to be doing, and we love to do that for status, for all of these different things. But the entirety of the world that you live in currently, that women are thriving in, all of it is maintained by men, and very little of it is maintained by women.
Do you think that in a society without men, women couldn't do these things? Like you're picking the most,
Yes.
not to sound
Yes.
mean, but like you're
Yes,
picking
I
like
think
the
they could.
bottom. These are the
Yes.
bottom men of society. These are the, not to be mean, but these are the bottom of all men.
Electricians are the bottom of society. That's
I'm
Shout out to
sorry.
the- shout out to the U.S. Army.
I'm sorry. Electricians are building the roads.
I said the infrastructure, and yes, they are building
Electricians
the
are building the most, and also yes, electricians are trade jobs would go underneath college jobs. If you want to compare them to other educated
Why would
people.
they go underneath?
Let's let Malek get awarded.
Why would they go
hold on.
underneath?
They're underneath because they require less training and they pay less.
They don't require less training.
They, by definition, do require less training.
Then show me the definition where college degree means less training than a trade degree.
Because typically trades are something that you can train into in a shorter period of time than a more specialized college degree level job.
No, in fact, to go from a journeyman to a master takes many, many, many years of training.
You're comparing a master. We're not talking about a 4-year degree grad holder as being a master. Who do you think makes more money, a master software engineer or a master electrician or carpenter?
Well, it depends on what the electrician is doing.
Oh my
If
God.
they're a master electrician, for instance, and they're working inside of a nuclear silo, I think that they're probably making a lot of fucking money.
Okay, if they're a master software engineer, their name is Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah,
I mean, we
he's
can
gonna
play
make
that
a
game
lot
if
of
you
money,
want.
but that's an
I don't-
exception
now
to
you're-
the.
Yeah, but
now Zuckerberg,
I
does he
know
have
it's
a
an
college
exception.
degree?
So
Didn't
you're
he
saying
drop out of college?
you're saying on exception, you think people in the trades make more money than people with college degrees?
If they're men, yeah, often they do. Yes, that's correct.
Often they
catching
do.
up.
I'm asking on
It's
average.
definitely catching up. It's definitely catching up because what's happened is the labor force is not really there's a lot of men out there that are not working, and we had Waller on our show, Justin Waller, and he talks about like when he has union people that come on to work on some of his building sites, his construction sites, those guys, he would take those over a master's degree 100 times out of 100. Now, is that an exception? Is that everywhere?
Wait, over a
Not
master's degree
necessarily.
for what? Doing
Wait,
construction
Tina,
work?
Let's let Malek just get one word in. She hasn't spoken.
Yeah, Malek, go ahead. Go ahead, Malek. Sorry.
So in regards to like women being in the workforce, I think Angela was the one who brought that up. Women literally would not be able to get to work, would not be able to work, would not be able to do anything if men didn't exist. Men built the roads that they drive on, men built the cars that they drive, men built the buildings that they work in. Most of the time their boss or their CEO is a man. Because men just do things better. And that's not even being sexist. That's just facts. Like if men didn't exist, women literally wouldn't even be able to work. So to even bring up the point like, oh, a lot of the workforce is women, that's irrelevant because every woman working could be replaced by a man. And yes, you could say the other around, but you're not going to see women paving the roads. You're not going to see women being civil engineers. You're not going to see women like doing it. I mean, they could, but they don't. They choose jobs that don't require degrees. They choose jobs that they can just be nurturers and supporters.
Aren't women going to
Sometimes they
school
do.
more than men
Sometimes
now?
they
What do you
do.
mean they choose jobs that don't require degrees?
The average woman,
but look
is
at the industries they're in.
okay. I guess nursing requires a degree, right? There's a lot of female nurses.
Mm-hmm.
But like
It's not a
lot
4-year
of
degree sometimes, but yeah.
More women are entering
but,
med
like,
school now than men. Like
a
I mean,
lot of
it's
women
slowly
work in
changing.
customer support, work as secretaries, work as servers.
Yep.
Like versus
That's all
men
true.
who are civil engineers, who are architects. Architecture doesn't require degrees, a certificate, but women wouldn't be able to function without men. And I don't know how like
Men can't function without women. What are these weird
Yeah,
arguments of
I
women?
don't-
Like,
I
what
don't-
world
I
do you
don't
guys
know.
live in?
it's like both things. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
when
I
you
don't
say
think, like,
when you
it's
say
not
that
like, it's not
though,
a competition between the two sexes. Like I think when we speak
It's
about
not a
this is why-
competition,
but
I
but
think
but you make it sound like it because you continuously
No,
belittle women,
it's
and
an
then you say that
invalid point.
we're just like subjective to men in everything we do. And I'm just saying, why do we have to frame it in that
does
way,
belittle
and as
women.
if that's the only like this Indian giving
because
idea
it's
that-
true. Because
not
it's true. It
But,
is
like
true.
historically, men have given you these things. Sure, but we're speaking in this time, and I'm saying that I don't believe that it's quite necessary. I don't understand how men are falling behind in society, yet still saying that we own the world.
Tell me the metrics that
Men are
you-
falling
It
behind in
doesn't make sense.
society because of this feminist
Because other
push
men
to
are
be
beating other men
equal,
down, telling
and
them
for
they
men
aren't
to
shit.
for men
Because
to
if you're not
embrace
6
their
feet tall-
femininity.
Because if you don't,
And-
if you're not 6 feet tall, if you don't make 6 figures, you're not shit. If you won't get a girl to submit to you, it doesn't make
No,
any
that's
sense.
the dumb red pill theory.
No,
of
because
these
you're saying
incel
that-
below average men
Because we're
idolizing
speaking
above
about how-
average men that they'll never be. That's the non-existent internet like mentality.
But you're going on the speaking points that this is what women need to do. To just stay in the kitchen and just stay at home. So
I never said women should stay in the
so what
kitchen.
should
I think
women
women
do?
do pretty well in the kitchen. But I didn't say they should stay there. I think women should work. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that, like, an equal society is even possible, I just think that's crazy. Like, you can never have a society where both gender roles are not important in their own individual way.
Yeah, but that's different from what you said in the beginning. You're saying that women don't basically contribute to society. Basically, we can just stay at home. Is basically referring it to.
No, I said that women would not even be able to be in the workforce if it wasn't for all the work men have done.
Yeah, but men wouldn't have
fact.
If it wasn't for women. Men wouldn't have meals if women didn't cook it. There's so many things that were complementary, but again, it's a the way that you're framing everything is a competition.
Men wouldn't have meals if women didn't cook them?
Isn't that why men want wives? Like, you guys would just be eating shit food all the time. I don't get it.
Men can't cook themselves healthy food?
Women can't build roads?
No, they can't. They're not even physically built to do it.
They're not physical. What do you think? Those jobs aren't you actually picking the road up and putting it down. Most of this shit, you have tools and stuff that you use. What are you talking about?
I know. Have you ever done one of those jobs?
I did. I was a fucking carpet cleaner. We did drywall installation. We did water damage. We tore up fucking basements. Yeah.
Let me notate some differences for you. We have different skeletal structures.
Oh my God!
Women can't deal with the heat.
This? Yeah,
women can't deal with the heat as well. They physiologically cannot do a lot of these jobs on average.
The average construction job doesn't have to be outside in Phoenix in 120-degree weather.
It does if you're building a fucking road, Destiny.
Men take breaks when it's really hot outside. You know that, right?
Yeah. And they're going to have to work in those conditions, right?
Again, the constant back and forth. Like, I'm trying to understand this, and maybe I don't get this, but. If you guys were building roads and infrastructure and there weren't women, would you still be doing this shit? Would you just be living in huts and sleeping on futons? Again, it goes back to we do need each other. You guys do this shit for women. Women do shit for men. So again, it's egalitarian. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. That doesn't make sense.
Okay,
wait,
but
is egalitarian or is not egalitarian?
In a patriarchy, there's both men and women. The man's role is to be a leader, a guide, or whatever. And the woman's role is to nurture and support the man in a functioning patriarchy, correct?
Sure, but what is a man leading this day and age? I don't understand. If we're
in an egalitarian society, they're exactly equal. There's no roles. Women do the same shit men do.
Yes.
So if women do the same exact shit men do, so you have all these labor intensive. And I'm saying this as someone who worked in construction for 4 years, and as someone who's been in the blue collar and white collar fields, men just do it better. Men are faster at doing shit like that. They are physically built for that, versus women do so much better in a nurturing or supporting role in society. So
what did you do for construction for 4 years? I want to know.
Yes, women theoretically could.
Wait, I'm curious what your job was before. What? Because no offense to anybody that works these jobs, most people I knew were lazy as fuck. Okay, blue collar guys, or at least in the industries I worked in, are not running around like working super fucking hard. Blah blah. You're generally doing as little as you can to cash out as much as you can before the fucking somebody catches you jerking off or messing around or whatever. Like, it's not like these people are out here like fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger, like building entire fucking houses on their back. Like, what are we talking about right now?
Yeah, well, yeah, they are. Okay, and they are working hard. They're working long hours.
Yeah,
they're working 60, 70 hours a week. They are hauling extraordinarily heavy things. Their work requirements for even basic factory work is very strenuous on the body. What the fuck are you talking about?
Again, I think that
I was curious what Malek's job was. I don't know. I don't think I used to work with servos, Andrew.
I'm actually going to use my experience in the construction industry.
You think that installing
I'm going to use my experience in the construction industry, for example.
Are you saying, Destiny, that are you saying that working on robotics and working on machines is not hard, difficult, strenuous work? Because it is.
I've never seen an industry where everybody is hardcore busting their ass like constantly on the shit they're doing.
Not everybody,
I'm pretty sure even the meme is that like if you drive around and you see people working on roads and shit, 95% of the drive you drive by, they're literally just fucking standing there. Now I know that's not happening all the time, okay? But I'm pretty sure blue collar, white collar, most people are just trying to do the least amount of work they can to get by. Like that's generally
let me
the case
concede
with most
a few points that I would agree that in basically anywhere you go, that there's a core group of people who tend to do more work than anybody else does, okay? So I'll agree that that's true, but I don't think that that takes away from the fact that, yes, these jobs are difficult, they are strenuous on the body, they do require a lot of work, and people are working extremely long hours, and yeah, I do think that they're busting their ass, and I do think that from a physical standpoint, that women are not going to be doing logging and they're not going to be doing line work for power lines, and they physically, I don't think most of them are even capable of doing that. Can you meet me halfway here?
No, I think they can do the job. Might be on average, because these jobs suck. And chances are, if you're part of a lower class family,
so men are just dumb.
The ones that do those jobs, Andrew, yes, they are. Yes. That's
No, they're not.
Okay, sorry, you're wrong.
Why do you think they're dumb? Why do you think that these people are dumb?
Because the more successful
linemen are dumb.
I know this is hard and offensive or whatever, or triggers you or whatever to hear it, but right now, society is oriented around high IQ workers tend to earn more money. If you were to take the collective IQ of people working in trades and compare them to people working white-collar jobs, the people working the white-collar jobs are smarter. Smarter men don't roof. Smarter men aren't doing power lines. Smarter men aren't doing construction. They're in fucking air-conditioned offices earning 2, 3, 4 times as much and take their family to Disney World twice a year.
You're talking about an amount of jobs which is minuscule and not even available to most human beings, let alone men.
What do you mean? There's a greater demand right now for middle class, for college educated workers in the United States than there probably ever has been in all of human history.
So backing up, that really doesn't negate what I'm saying, which is that there's still only a minuscule amount of these positions where you're earning $300,000+ a year for any human being on Earth.
Earning $70,000 a year.
Earning $100,000 a year in a trade is not hard, Destiny.
You're wrong.
I'm not wrong.
You don't earn on average $100,000 a year in a trade.
Well,
that's just not true.
If you take an average for a journeyman, I bet you it's around 50, 60 grand. And I guarantee you that anecdotally, at least, most tradesmen you talk to, because the hours they work, probably earning around 80 to 100K. Yeah.
Okay, if you want to go and work 2 jobs, you can do that as a white collar as well. I'm not going to compare people working 80 hours a week.
Well, this is part of the confines of the job requirement, though. You can't leave a line that's running because the fucking clock whistled. You might be able to do that in the white collar world, but part of the job for maintaining these systems is keeping them up 24 hours a day. It's part of the requirement.
I just want to hear then I just want to hear your commitment. So you think that trade workers on average will out-earn degree workers? We'll say STEM degree, obviously not like an arts major or something.
Okay, you're just making shit up.
Wait, okay, so you don't think they out-earn them? Do you think people that work in the trades will out-earn people on average that work in that get STEM degrees?
You're literally straw manning my argument. Repeat my
argument.
argument. So I'll tell you what, repeat my argument back. Repeat it back. I want to be good faith with you. Just repeat the argument back.
Can we try something here real quick? Destiny. So I think what the argument is the college degree means less the more people that get college degrees. And so those men who get college degrees, not all of them are getting bachelor degree level work. I know I didn't. I got a college degree from UT Austin. I ended up managing a fucking strip club, or I was a DJ at a strip club afterwards. There were no jobs after 9/11. So not necessarily what's happened is those people who work in trades, it's caught up because a lot of people who get college degrees aren't getting those jobs. Now, you're correct. If we're just talking about people who get master's degree levels jobs, then for sure they're making more money than trades. But what Andrew's saying is like not everyone has those jobs. It is not the majority.
There's an availability.
There's a
limited availability.
Only 26% of the population makes more than $100,000 a year.
We're not talking about just. I'm just saying that on average, a STEM degree person is going to earn more than on average a person working in the trades.
For sure.
But can you tie that into what that has to do with what we're talking about?
Because you said women don't want to work those jobs.
Right.
And I said,
I also said they can't physically do some of those jobs.
That's fine. You said women don't want to, and I said that's true, but neither do men. In a lower class family that are working those jobs, where the IQs run lower, where the college education runs lower, somebody's going to be working those jobs. It's probably going to be the men, and the women are probably going to either be working a fucking service job or they're going to be staying at home taking care of the family. But
which of these jobs do you think are low IQ jobs?
Trades on average are probably going to skew lower IQ in terms of being capable than STEM related jobs.
Can you demonstrate that? I'm actually curious.
Bro, I don't know. No, you're so fucking retarded in bad faith if you're going to sit here and pretend otherwise.
I agree.
That is like almost self-evidently
true. I'm curious now. Now I'm curious.
That's almost self-evidently going to be true.
Why would that be self-evidently true?
I think, Andrew, if he's just talking about STEM, because remember before the discussion was college education. College education all across, I know some really stupid people that have bachelor's degrees. I don't necessarily think that's the case. But if Destiny is just specifically talking about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they probably do have, on average,
but there's overlap when you're talking about some of those jobs with what you would consider to be these infrastructure jobs. That's the problem that I have.
Correct.
So I want to know. So what I want to know is like, if you're saying that somebody who gets a STEM degree, right, in nursing, for instance, right? Do you consider that STEM? I don't know. Do you consider that STEM?
Science, technology, probably, I guess. Yeah, sure.
I guess I would too. I don't think that nurses have a higher IQ than electricians do. I don't believe that shit.
They probably do. That'd be my guess.
Well, then let's find out. Like, I'm willing to be wrong, but I don't think they do.
Well, I would jump in just to say that maybe.
Like I don't think so.
I would say maybe they do, because I think that it's all about how you make your money, and I think that if you're just going to use your back labor to work, I mean, how long could you really go before you feel like I'm making all this money and I'm depressed and life sucks, as opposed to someone who learns how to make their money a lot smarter, because they have a higher IQ. So I don't think that you're actually arguing that in good faith when you say that you don't believe that. I mean, as somebody who has a background of working in the fucking nail industry, we make a lot of money. It's quite fucking miserable. My whole family makes a lot of money, but they're miserable. Me diving into a new space where I have to explore other parts of my brain other than just physical labor, I think that's different for me, but it's the way that we make money, it's just different. I think that it's
just briefly, just so I just
Sure.
and then I'll give you the floor back, right?
Sure.
But you said that you think I'm arguing what in bad faith?
Because it seems like you're not trying to understand what he's trying to say, because I believe that
I do understand. Do you want me to repeat it back?
Sure, repeat it.
That way you know that it's not in bad faith. So my argument, this has gone from a foundation for why it is that men are necessary in a patriarchy is necessary for enforcement, and the conversation graduated from there into what types of jobs men and women can even do, what they're even capable of doing. From there, at this point, we're moving into, if you're talking about trades and you're talking about people in STEM fields, Destiny says that the people who are in trades have a lower IQ than people in STEM fields on average. Okay, I think that that might be true, but I also think that there might be overlap between these things when you're talking about the maintenance of society in some of these STEM fields. I don't see how what I said was bad faith at all.
Well, I think the biggest issue is like not understanding or being, I don't know, having enough common sense or to realize I think too much of anything is bad. I think if we're leaning too much and saying that somebody in STEMs is high IQ and they can just accomplish everything in life and they're happy making money and they're thriving in society.
Also, just a real, as an ultra real quick, just because I'm Googling and a lot of people are typing this in chat, it seems like electricians are some of the highest IQ tradesmen, and their IQ is around 110, and it looks like nurses are like 116 to 120. So even electricians, which are the highest IQ of the tradesmen, it seems like nurses are higher.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a chart right there. So that's an IQ distribution by occupation right there. Yeah, definitely. By the way, some of the wealthiest people I know, most successful, work in sales, and some of them are not very high IQ. So we don't need to necessarily put like how much money you make directly in correlation with IQ.
Wait. No. We should, though. That's not fair to say, right? That's like saying, I think Andrew brought it up earlier, Zuckerberg dropped out of college. The average college dropout is not earning $50 billion a year. Sure. IQ and income in the United States and across all of the Western world are going to be
generally correlated.
No, not generally. They're highly correlated. They're ultra highly correlated.
Yeah, but you brought up Zuckerberg as an example of somebody who was highly educated making money.
That's not because he is highly educated. He just didn't do it the conventional way. Most college dropouts are not as smart as Mark Zuckerberg. Just because you failed college because you can't do remedial English doesn't mean that you're highly educated. I'm sorry. Sure, that's fine. I'm just saying that in general, people that are working on the engineering or STEM side of things, even if we look at electricians, who do you think earns more money on average, an electrician or somebody that gets a degree in electrical engineering? Even you aren't even a trades worker. Don't you literally have a degree?
No, I don't have a degree.
You didn't get a degree in mechanical engineering?
Nope, just by trade.
Oh, okay.
I just went and apprenticed. Yep.
I don't know why we're so focused on IQ. I think that's relevant.
We're talking about
I guess maybe I have the equivalency.
If someone's good,
I don't know.
But hold on, if someone's good at a blue collar job, if they're professional at what they do, I don't think it fucking matters if they're bad at what someone else does. Like, if an engineer is insanely smart at engineering, that's great. They don't need to be knowledgeable on nursing or knowledgeable on construction or knowledgeable on AC or HVAC or shit like that. Like, I think that argument's like completely. If you're good at what you do, that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's a really good point. I think that's absolutely true.
And master that, then you stick to that.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think generally, most women are better at doing certain things, and most men are better at doing certain things. So why are women trying to do things that they're genetically not better at, and why are men trying to do women's roles that they're genetic? Yes, they can. Both can do either. But it's like, if you suck at something and you're good at something else, like, why do you choose to go out of your way and work harder?
I think that's the entire point.
To be equal in an industry that wasn't meant for you.
The entire point is that people should probably just be able to do and sort themselves into the jobs that they work best at. Not that all women should do this or all men should do Y.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay. Well, then we don't have an argument then, so.
I felt like we kind of
Sorry, I just ended the debate. We all agree now.
There we go. We all agree.
I don't think you guys all agree, but if you guys are done with this segment, we move on to the next one, unless anyone has anything they want to add.
I think we got off the topic of patriarchy and started doing which I think would be a great discussion to have a correlation of IQ and earning potential. I think that, or success in general, I think that would be a cool discussion at some other point.
Let's redirect back to the patriarchy and see if there's any disagreements left on that still.
Yeah, so I still think we got caught up into the weeds. I would still like Angela Knight or Destiny or either on your side to give a refutation of the equalization of power between men and women and how you think we're ever going to move past a patriarchy, knowing that there's never going to be an equalization of force. I literally don't understand that.
It's like arguing in society, like which phenotype would be more suited to hunter gathering. It's just not really that relevant in terms of the most successful societies in the world right now.
How is it not relevant? It seems to be like it's the core placement that you're never going to be able to get away from.
Food and water are core placements, but they're not the big differentiator between the has and the has-nots right now, globally speaking.
Okay, so I think that's fair to say, but if I make the descriptive statement, it is true that we need water, it is true that we need food, it is true we build cities where there's water because there's water there, I can agree to all those things. But it also is true that men are the enforcement arm of basically all law and defense globally for everybody everywhere at all times. How is that ever going to move from a patriarchal system?
The enforcement arm is not that impressive, and it's not really the big differentiator between, like, there were enforcement arms in societies 10,000 years ago when we first planted our first weed things into the ground. So it's not really the big deal of what we're talking about today.
Destiny, do you think that it was more important, that enforcement arm, like say in the 1850s or the 1750s, and it's become less important as technology has advanced? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. How is it less important than it was in the 1700s?
I just want to get his full idea here. And so you think as we go further into the future, we may see a more egalitarian society because technology will take over some of those labor and defense functions that men have?
Because I think increasingly our society is becoming more geared around intelligence. Is basically what society is becoming increasingly geared around. So even the way we fight wars is more and more geared around high IQ people operating drones, operating aircraft, operating whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
So your argument is, as we get further and further away from a survival scenario, we get more and more
specialized.
The possibility of egalitarianism is possible. My only argument to that is, again, men are still more assertive genetically than women, so I don't necessarily see that being the case.
Sure, it just depends on when
you don't agree with that. What?
I was going to say, it depends on when you say like egalitarian. I don't mean, like I said, even in a perfectly egalitarian society, men and women are probably still going to gravitate towards different jobs.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly my point. And Andrew, your point, do you understand what he's saying is like, it was probably more important to have those men as enforcement arms and becomes progressively less important as the world, like, for instance,
but I don't agree that that's true. That's the problem.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't actually agree that this is true. I think that fundamentally, you still are confined to the rules, right? And the rules are, in the end, not that might makes right, but might does make. Whether you think that it's moral or immoral, it does make. And fundamentally, everything for rights is going to come down to enforcement, and it's always going to come down to men enforcing them, giving them, gifting them, taking them away, this type of thing, regardless of the technology. We've had guns available to women for I don't know how long, okay? Long time, and the shooting industry has gravitated towards trying to train as many of them as possible because it's a huge market that they can pander to, et cetera, et cetera. They're still not very good with them. They're still, to this day, most women still don't know how to fucking use a gun. We're the shit. They really don't. Okay, and this is always going to be the case. Even the mechanism for using the gun, using like Destiny's semi-automatic Glock, right? I bet his wife has trouble cocking the slide. Most people's wives do. Again, this is like hyperbole, Destiny, but I'm just saying all of these things still require some fundamental strength to do. And no, I don't agree that technology is taking away from the fact that the equalization of force is not a possibility.
I think so. In Destiny's, like, as we get further and further away from a survival scenario, the possibility of equalization might be there, but it's not possible because men are still more assertive. Would that be a fair characterization?
No, I think it's more fundamental than that, but okay. I think that you understand what I'm saying. I just think it's even more, there's more of a grounding there in the presupposition, which is, yes, they're more assertive, and I think that's part of why they're necessary towards the enforcement. But I think ultimately it really comes down to physical strength, bone density, structure, all of these different things. And that becomes the requirement for why there can't really be ever egalitarianism. I mean, you're always dealing with a force which is monumentally more powerful than you are.
Yeah, no, I still disagree with that. I think that it goes back to you just comparing it to the enforce of men with the physical strength. I think that in the society that we do live in and that the society we're moving towards, so it isn't just the physical strength. That I think it will be quite egalitarian. I think it will be like a 50-50. I think there is a sense of IQ, whoever you marry, a woman or whoever you're with, there's a complementary factor that isn't just sourced around just like physical strength. So I completely disagree.
You're talking about men choosing women because of their IQ?
Well, I just feel like if he's saying that it's just a physical strength as far as enforcing laws and rules.
No. So let's, Angela, just so we can make it clear. So let's just say assertiveness, aggressiveness, then there's like physical strength, right? These are all different things. You can still be assertive and aggressive and not be very physically strong. You can also be very physically strong and not assertive or aggressive. But my point is, men on average, because they have 17 times as much testosterone as women, on average are going to be more assertive, right? They're going to step into situations, they're going to be more aggressive, and they're going to be physically stronger. Therefore, as we get into like this blank slate society where anyone can have any job, men are still going to prefer having jobs in the infantry as engineers, and take certain jobs as far as politicians.
Because their bodies are equipped for it, right?
Yeah, because from an evolutionary standpoint, they're equipped for that. That's essentially what we're saying is, even though as we get further and further away from a survival scenario, the possibility of a woman taking more and more of these occupations exists. It still isn't going to happen on average because men are more aggressive and assertive.
Sure. I think that men are aggressive and assertive in many ways, evolutionary, sure. But I don't see them doing that if there's no reason to do it. If there's no one to do it for. I hate to say it. I know, Andrew, you disagree with me, but I think
they do it now. Men can collectively and do in nations. They just snap their fingers and women's rights are gone. They can't do shit.
Yeah, but half of them aren't even going to school or working. So
what does that have to do with anything I just said?
Meaning,
Angela?
why would they even join to go to the military and do anything?
You're not listening to me. Listen very closely to what I'm saying.
Okay.
Men in nations, right this second as we speak, have just said collectively, women have no rights and women can't do shit about that. You understand that?
Sure.
Okay, so that shows you that basically by the way, anywhere on planet Earth in history that this has ever happened where men collectively say you have no rights, women don't have any, and they can't do anything about it. The opposite is not true for men. Men can collectively say you have no more rights to another group of men, and those men can do something about that. Women can't.
Wait, what? What are you talking about? Men have oppressed other men throughout all of human history.
They have, but other men can collectively do something back. You can go back to Spartacus and the gladiator war with Rome, and you can go to all these different slave rebellions which happened. All of these things which are men being oppressed by other men and those men being able to fight back. There is no such example for women. Ever.
I believe we live in a democracy. I don't really see that happening. I don't see us regressing back in time. So I see an extreme hypothetical, but I don't see how that's realistic.
But if men decide we don't have a democracy anymore, we don't.
Yeah, and I don't think.
But if women decide we don't have a democracy anymore, and men decide we do, we still will. That's the distinction.
Yeah, I don't think you can still have a democracy if half your society doesn't want to participate.
What are they going to do about it?
They could stop voting. They could stop supporting men in a million different ways. What do you mean? I mean,
you could still have a democracy where only men were allowed to vote democratically. That would still be a democracy.
I guess in Andrew's world it would be. Okay.
No, in every world that would be.
All right, so here's
why would that not be a democracy? That makes no sense.
Democracy doesn't imply half your population for immutable characteristics aren't voting.
Yeah, well, democracy just implies that there's a democratic process. There's all sorts of people right now who can't vote. Children can't vote, Destiny. Are we not a real democracy?
I think that most people today, it's a cute example, I guess. Yeah, also dead people can't vote. It's a cute example, but I think that if we had a society where black people or Mexicans or people over a certain height weren't allowed to vote, I think people would question the integrity of that democracy.
Well, maybe, but that wouldn't make it not a democracy.
Okay, by definition, then, if you were to restrict voting to just people with the last name Kennedy, that would also be a type of democracy.
Yes, it would. I agree.
Okay, thank you. Most people wouldn't.
If you had a nation that was based where all your laws are based on, the democratic rule and only X percentage of the population could vote. Let's say they had to do military service first, like Germany had that policy for a while. If you had to do X amount of military service in order to vote, would you say that that's not a real democracy?
I didn't even listen to what you said. I'm sorry, what?
I asked if you had to do military service in order to vote, which has been done in nations before, that's not a democracy?
We're getting way off.
I want to know the answer.
I think that in today's society, if we were to restrict voting just to people that were in the military, I think people would question the integrity of our democracy. I think the democratic standards worldwide have evolved significantly since whatever year it was, where only military-going people could vote. Yes.
So that wouldn't be a real democracy.
Okay, wait, hang on. We're getting way off topic. I want to redirect this to the initial topic. I think Michael said he wants to say something, so go ahead, Michael.
No, I think again, I feel like I'm playing Reginald Denny here. The thing that Andrew's saying is that yes, before women have suffrage in the United States, it was still a representative democracy here. And Destiny is saying the standards have evolved to where any normal liberal democracy should always allow women to vote. So both things can be true, but what he's saying is that the standards have changed now. And so even though Iraq, before we invaded in 1990 or in 2003, women weren't able to vote, they would still consider themselves a democracy, even though they weren't really a democracy.
Why wouldn't they have been a democracy?
Because in reality, Saddam Hussein was doctoring all of the votes.
Well, in that, so in that instance, I agree. But let's say that it was legitimate, where it was just the men who were allowed to vote and not the women. You could say it was not be a democracy. I don't understand.
No, I agree with you. So legitimately, let's say the 1700s and the 1800s of the United States, that would be a democracy where women were not able to vote.
Yeah, but it was a legitimate democracy.
Correct. But what Destiny is saying is now we've evolved as a society to where that's a standard to where we don't find that acceptable. And maybe you do find it. I mean, I've heard you say.
Let's let Malek get a word in. She's been trying to talk for like a few minutes. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Malek.
No, I was just going to say, like, not on the whole democracy topic, because I quite frankly think that's dumb to argue, like, what constitutes as a democracy when you can just look up the definition. But for those who, like, believe in that an egalitarian society can function, if you think every man and every woman in the workforce today switched roles, would society be able to function as efficiently as it's functioning now? And I don't think it's functioning the most efficiently now, or would you see a genuine decrease in functionality of this, like, our society right now?
You would see a genuine decrease if you did any switch like that. If all black people and white people switched jobs, yes, you would see a decrease. If all Asian people, if all short people and tall people, if all Democrats and Republicans switched jobs, you would literally see a decrease in the efficiency of society. Yes, that is true.
So if you took a black nurse and a white nurse, or no, if you took a black person and a white person, right? They had different jobs, and you switched their jobs. Like, forget about degrees. If you gave them the same degrees, the same education.
If you took all the nurses that lived in Detroit and swapped them with all the nurses that lived in Baltimore, you'd have an inefficiency. So, like, any sort of change like that would cause a massive inefficiency.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think
so. Maybe.
But you're right. Look, you're right. Listen, if all tank infantry commanders all of a sudden became women, would that cause an inefficiency? Yes. I certainly agree that would.
Forget about
yes,
their intelligence
but at the same time, hold on. But at the same time, I flew with like 3 or 4 excellent female pilots, and I flew with the majority of the excellent pilots I flew with were men. That doesn't mean there aren't some women that were good pilots. There are some. There's some that are outside the standard.
And I never said a woman can't do these things.
Right.
But to imply that a theoretical world where everyone is equal would function just as well as a world where it's a patriarchy.
Yeah, but Destiny's not arguing that.
I don't think anybody's arguing
that. Nobody's making that argument.
All right, guys.
My bad. I kind of got off topic with the whole democracy thing. I thought we were still disagreeing on that.
I think we should move on to the next topic. I'll give everyone closing thoughts. So just go ahead and make take a minute or two, make your closing thoughts, and then move on to the next topic. I think the chat is saying that it's kind of becoming a little circular. So you want to start it off, Angela, since you're first in the order?
Yeah, I do believe that society is evolving and is changing, and like Malek said, you can make it whatever you want it to be, and everybody can do whatever job they're good at. And patriarchy sucks. So that's it.
Okay, Andrew.
Well, patriarchy sucks. She certainly hasn't made a case for it tonight, and nobody else has either. They haven't even made a single argument for the dispute of the use of force whatsoever, or the foundation. Destiny made this bizarre claim. It's not even that important to society. I made a compelling argument. That's probably one of the most important key factors of society. Not only that, Angela's arguments were, well, really, she didn't really have any arguments. It was just mostly like, well, women go to school and stuff. And it's like, well, that's nice that they...
Angela, it's closing statements.
Sorry.
Didn't interrupt yours. But it's
sorry.
like, oh, hey, women go to school and stuff, and you know, girls are just rocking it. It's like, well, that really doesn't tell very much of the story or the tale here. And the truth is that an egalitarian society is not possible, regardless of if you think that it requires 100% participation for it to be democracy or not. Egalitarianism is not a possibility. It's not ever going to happen. It's a pipe dream. It's a fantasy, and you can't move past the fact that the enforcement mechanism which is required is always going to be male, and it's always going to be predominantly male. So your rights are always going to come from men, whether you like it or not, Angela. So
okay, Michael.
Yeah, the original point was, as we move further and further away, like if we go back to like say the founding of our country, 1776, I think in that case men are going to have to perform laborious jobs. They're going to have to provide protection and security. In that case, you have a necessity for a patriarchy, and men are also more assertive, aggressive, and physically stronger. As we move further and further away from that agrarian society and further away from a survival scenario, women have the opportunity to step up in different places in the workplace. But even though they have the opportunity, in general, men are still going to have a lot of those jobs because they are genetically more aggressive, they're more assertive, and they're physically stronger. So even though we may live in a place where, like, again, there's this story I've read before, women in Sweden, where things are very, very egalitarian, are still looking for more masculine men. They still, even though they have the ability to go and have as much free sex as they want, they still are looking, more and more of those women are looking to get married because our genetics sort of lead us down this path. And so because of that, I still think men are going to live, we're going to still live in a patriarchy because men are more assertive.
Okay, Destiny.
Yeah, nobody analyzes society this way. Nobody looks at countries this way. It's like so unbelievably reductionist that it's like the point is bordering on unfalsifiable. I don't know if there's ever been a movement in all of human history where it was only men against only men and women, or only men. Like generally men and women, even when there is a hierarchy, are working together to some extent. And the claim that like men could take all the rights from women and oppress them and women can't, it's like, I can't even, it's not even like I can point to other societies that didn't have women or had only women. It's just such a weird claim, and nobody measures the success of any country. Well, you do measure the success of country by participation of different genders, and generally it's as women participate more, especially economically and reproductively, meaning more reproductive rights, that's generally when those societies begin to thrive more. But yeah, I just think it's a funnily reductive way to analyze society.
Okay, last up, Malek. Malek.
True.
Malek, your time to shine.
Yeah, so I think patriarchy is the only possible way for a society to function efficiently. Yes, theoretically, women can do any job a man is doing, but I don't see why they would want to when men can just do it better. And same with jobs that require nurturing and all that shit. Like, women just do it better, so why should we have a society where we abolish gender roles and have people doing roles that they're not the best at, when we could just have a world where people do things they're good at. But yeah, I guess like theoretically, like women could do shit, men could do shit, but I just think that's stupid. And I do like that we're getting to a more progressive point where men are able to choose if they want to do a woman's job or a man's job. Yes, I use this term. If you're offended, that's a you problem. And fuck, I forgot my last point. Oh yeah, but women only want to be masculine, and women only want to take on roles that are traditionally done by men until it's shit that they don't want to do. Like, women only want to be masculine when they have the option to. Women would never want to get drafted. Women would never want to be septic tank cleaners. Women would never want to do the dirty, grungy work that they're going to come home every day with a sore back because they've been carrying scaffolding all day up and down hills. Like, women aren't going to want to do that. Like, men do that because if they don't do it, no one will. Like, women only like doing that shit when they have the choice, I feel like.
All right.
And cool. I personally like being in the kitchen.
All right. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. This has actually got the most upvotes by far, so it seems like people really care about this. So this is the proposition. Male depression is an all-time high. Men are committing suicide in record numbers. Why is this happening, and what are potential solutions? And for this one, yeah, I guess we'll do opening statements again. Angela, you can go. Let's keep it a minute or less, though. Let's keep it quick.
Wait, sorry, what was it again?
So I'll just repeat it. Male depression is an all-time high. Men are committing suicide in record numbers. Why is this happening? Like, why are men more depressed nowadays than they were? And what are some potential solutions?
I believe that the depression is at the all-time high because we're so heavily dependent on the patriarchy system for men to operate in the society where it isn't just fully functioning for them to just be back labor mammals, I guess. I believe that we don't teach men how to express themselves and how to navigate through the society we live in now, being that it's driven with technology, AIs, and all that crap, not just, I don't know, changing the oil rigs and all that stuff. There's no space that men are creating with each other to actually have solutions instead of just pandering to each other.
Okay, Andrew?
Well, that was the most absurd shit that I ever heard in my life. But other than that being completely absurd and making no sense whatsoever, I think that the reason that you see the male suicide rate so high, and by the way, you have to break this down a little bit better because there's actually demographics of males where the suicidality is much less than other demographics of males. So I think it has to be broken down this way. But generally, I think it's due to the fact that we've kind of moved more towards a gynocentric society. We've started to move this way. There's been kind of a great con that has been put on men's backs and that they're starting to recognize. But they've essentially been treated like shit for, I don't know, about 50 years or so. And you can see the kind of suicide numbers reflect this a bit. So as you're kind of looking at this scale and this arc, which has happened, you start to recognize that, you know, divorce is pitted against them. All of these different things are pitted against them. And then you have this really key fundamental factor, which is that nobody gives a shit about men, including other men. Now, we are competitive by nature. We're always going to be competitive by nature. And I would expect to see the suicidality of men be higher than it is for women. I would expect to see that due to that kind of ontological nature which we have. So I think that also another thing which people forget about in this conversation often is that men are just better at it. So when they take the final solution, they make sure it's final because they know how to use guns and things like this. They make sure that it's over. Whereas women, when they make these attempts, they use pills, things that won't damage the face, all of these different types of things. So this is more than just a singular answer. This is more nuanced and it has complexity to it. So I'm happy to get into it.
Michael?
Yeah, Andrew took part of my point. So men and women, on average, do attempt suicide at similar rates. Now, when we're talking about 40-year-old men who are divorced, that's a much higher level. But men tend to commit suicide more because they use guns and ropes and balconies, and women tend to use slitting of the wrists and pills. I don't know if we can say all this stuff on YouTube, but that tends to be the reason why. Now, going back to what you said before, I'm going to go back to my original statement before. As we get further and further, if the majority of the human experience, let's just say 300,000 years of the human experience, has been humans in survival scenarios, and things that aided in survival would lead to rewarding, and things that were not aiding in survival would lead to, like, say, depression. As we get further and further away from a survival scenario and we get our gratification from things that don't cause us to accomplish goals or don't accomplish us to move our bodies, we just sit there and, like, again, I play a ton of video games, but play video games, watch pornography, things like that. As we get further and further away from a survival scenario, we're not accomplishing goals. And thus, by not accomplishing those goals, we get further and further into depression. We get further and further away from our natural state. And that's why I believe the increase in depression, especially with men, is concerned. And that also men being zeroed out after divorce.
Destiny?
Yeah, I feel like men have a really hard time, like, sorting themselves out emotionally, especially later on in life. I think, like, the highest age for suicides, I think it's like the 40 to 60 demographic of, I think, for white men are like the highest at risk. And I think a lot of the times it's because it might be because they're divorced. It might be just because they're lonely, but, like, kids are out of the house. They don't have any friends. They don't know how to reach out and talk to anybody. And then men have a really hard time asking for help because I think 40% of them say that it's, like, too embarrassing to do so, or that, like, they figured it out on their own and they don't want anybody to help them. So I think that men are kind of really in a rough shape when it comes to emotionally navigating the world. I don't know how we can blame it on feminism or anything else when it seems like men have always been predisposed towards higher suicidality than women, I believe. Yeah, seems like I go with that one.
Malek?
Yeah, so ultimately, it's kind of men's fault. Men don't support other men. Men don't lend an open ear to other men when men are down. If a man goes to another man and says, like, hey, I'm depressed, hey, I'm going through shit, it's fucking weak, hit the gym. Like, pussy, soy boy, hit the gym. Like, get off of Pornhub. Like, and they don't, like, men don't help other men going through issues. And because it hurts a man's ego to go to a woman who, and women often are supportive, but men almost never turn to a woman for emotional support because men have an ego issue. If men were more supportive to other men and men had less of a fucking ego, I think that men would be able to get the help they need. And in addition to that, Andrew brought up the point that, like, when men commit suicide versus women committing suicide, a lot of times men just do it better. Like, that sounds really fucked up to say, but it's true. And then the final point would be, why is it at record high numbers? You have social media, you have all these red pilled shit and like all the social media shit where a depressed single man is at home, goes on his phone, is just scrolling through these billionaires with these supercars, with these models, and thinking, I will never have that. What is the point of living? No girl wants me. I'm miserable. I'm fat. I'm overweight. I'm not fit. I will never be attractive like that. And they feel like there's no fucking hope. And they don't want to go to therapy because it's frowned upon. They don't want to reach out to their friends because they'll get bullied for it. I just think if men were more, I don't know, supportive to other men, I don't think we'd see that much of an issue. And I personally don't know what to do to change that because men have been like this for decades and decades and decades.
Open panel. Have at it, guys and girls.
Yeah, well, I guess that's one thing that women can do. We can emotionally express ourselves so we don't commit suicide first. So I guess we finally figured out what women are good at. So being.
Wait, what?
Yeah, because we sit here and say that men commit suicide and they're... Say it again, Malek?
No. This is a question for you. This was your statement.
Sorry, I heard something in my sentence.
Yeah.
So,
you don't think that it's because, women tend to like take pills and things like that are less effective than men?
No, I think at the end of the day, I think
what men will do is they'll literally put a weapon in their mouth and pull the trigger. So there's absolutely no chance that there's going to be a failure. And women don't try to do that. So I don't even understand this argument that you're making. Can you flesh it out for me?
My argument is that men don't at least speak about their issues. You don't talk about it. So what do? You go straight to action, which is you just want to commit the actual action of suicide. With women, we at least talk about it. We think about our kids. We think about our family. We think about...
Then why are they attempting it at the same rates and just men are more effective? That's the question. That's a big hole in your argument.
It's a cry for help. It's a cry for help.
Is it a cry for help, or is it because if you look at what undertakers and people like this say, women don't want to damage their face? There's a big thing with literally, I don't know why, but they don't actually want to damage their face when they have an open casket funeral, things like this. So they tend to not, and also because they don't usually own guns, they don't tend to utilize guns for suicide. Don't you think that's a better explanation?
I don't think that's it. This might sound mean. I wish I could find research to back this up, but like, if you're a woman and you take like 8 pills, I don't think you're trying to kill yourself. I think if you want to kill yourself, I think you'll kill yourself. I feel like it's more of a
personality disorder.
What?
Like borderline personality disorder.
Sure.
Like cry for help.
Sure. Yeah. I think. I don't think that. I don't think that if you try to OD using pills, I don't think you're as committed to it as you could be. That's.
Yeah. So going back to men not expressing their emotions, they don't talk about it. They don't create spaces for it.
Angela, can I ask you a question? So a lot of the times, if you were to say, why is it these men are actually committing suicide, or you were to ask them, a lot of them, it's financially being zeroed out. So that's one of the things where if I'm in that situation and maybe I do want to talk about my feelings, it doesn't make the problem go away. And 86% of the time, primary care is given to the woman after a divorce. And so now I've lost my children and I've lost a lot of money. It's not saying that it's a justification for committing suicide, but a lot of times feelings don't have anything to do with it. And that's the reason why they would commit suicide. It's not necessarily that they're not talking about their feelings enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That just might be an alternate hypothesis rather than just to think.
Also, wait, hold on real quick. Your example kind of defeated itself. Because you're saying that the reason why women don't commit suicide as much after divorce is because so many people console them. So it seems like it literally is because of their feelings. No?
Well, I mean, women aren't committing suicide because they're getting financially zeroed out, because the acquisition of resources maybe means something different to them. I don't know. Like, I think for a man, he kind of comes to the realization it's like my value and my worth throughout my entire life. And by the way, I'm not saying this is right. Comes from how much I can produce and how productive I am. And so now I've lost all that. maybe a lot of suicides happened after the crash of 2000, the crash of '08. You saw an increase in the number of suicides then. And then additionally, with men are being awarded or women are being awarded custody 1.5 standard deviations about 86% of the time, then that would mean that they're far likely to suffer from the depression, or if they're the ones with primary custody, far less likely to commit suicide when they're the primary caregiver of a child. So that's
sure.
Guys, let me just to kind of put things in perspective. So men have always historically committed suicide a little bit more than women, right? But as you can see, it was pretty close. And then in the 60s, 70s, something started to happen where women's suicide rate stayed the same and men just skyrocketed, right? So, one of the things we're discussing is what exactly happened. What caused the suicide rate for men to just go through the roof? Anyway, you were saying, Destiny?
I was responding to something that that was being said. But now we just said that. I don't know what happened. I was responding to something Michael said. I don't remember what I was responding to though.
I was talking about feelings. We're talking about feelings and not committing suicide.
Oh yeah, I think I was gonna say a guy that gets divorced shouldn't kill himself, right? There's probably some level of counseling or therapy that could help there. I don't think that's like an inevitability that like if you get divorced you have to kill yourself. But I think that women have an easier time asking for help versus men.
But that's men's fault.
That's what?
Yeah.
That's men's fault.
Okay,
like,
I mean, that's fault it is.
I'm just saying them asking for help. Because if a woman goes to another woman and says, hey, I'm depressed, I'm suicidal, whatever, that woman will typically listen and offer whatever support they can or encourage their friend to get help, even if it's a fucking stranger. If a man goes to another man and expresses he's mentally not okay, 9 out of 10 times, he's going to be made fun of and bullied for it, which is only going to make him worse.
Hold on. Alex, have you done this? Destiny, have you guys ever talked to a friend of yours from committing suicide? I have hundreds of problems.
This is really rough, and I think we're bad at this. That's a really bad question for actually. Thank you.
Destiny's told his friends to kill themselves when they've told him.
Well, not actually, but even I would say, Michael, I think you, me, and Alex are probably bad for this because if I had to guess, probably most men like over the age of 30 are going to take those conversations really seriously. I don't know how seriously they're going to take those conversations in high school, you know? Like, I think that if you're a guy over 25 or 30 and you bully your friends, you are legitimately a sociopathic piece of shit who should have your like throat cut. But if you're a guy that bullies your friends and you're in high school, you're probably like a normal dude, you know? Whereas I don't know if that same like level of vitriol even towards friends, I feel like it's probably enforced more by men at an earlier age. I could be wrong on that, but that's like just a guess. My hope is that like any guy over 30.
Why is that normal for men?
Because that's how we play. That's what we do with each other. Like even look at like guys. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
That's why the depression and suicide rates are higher. Like I said, it's a man's problem. Like
sounds like you're making an argument for toxic masculinity, Malek.
True.
It is toxic masculinity.
Like, when did Malek become a progressive?
I have 7 brothers. And I'm very close with all of them. So I barely am familiar with how men think and their mindsets towards things. And so many men are just so quick to just attack someone for being either down or lesser than society expects. And it's like I never see men, like, okay, sometimes you see it, but like the majority of the time when a man is down, other men, because they're competitive by nature, they will try to get higher up and leave that man in the dirt or push them even lower to get higher up in life. Like men don't
but Malek
want to like all win together.
But isn't part of the stoic nature of men and all of that hazing that also leads to a quality that nobody talks about, which is bravery?
No,
couldn't it be possible that some of this could be accounted for with the fact that men will actually follow through with this because they're braver than women?
I don't think there's anything brave. Hold on, Roger. I don't think there's anything brave about committing suicide.
Like,
no, I don't think that's bravery.
Wait, I think suicide is the most cowardly thing you can do. I don't think
these are nice. Hang on. These are nice platitudes, but most people don't lean towards self-termination, and there has to be some kind of aspect of follow through to actually do that. Now, you can make the argument it's mental illness or any number of different things, fine, but could there be an aspect that part of this hazing and part of the kind of stoic nature, which is men, would lead them to do this just because they have the follow through to do so, whereas women don't seem to?
I personally will never excuse suicide or try to make justification for it. Suicide is quitting, it's giving up on life, it's throwing in the towel, it's being a coward, and it's being a shit person to everyone in your life. It's literally one of the worst things you can do. So I think that, I don't know, trying to justify like why the reason.
So Malek, when samurais did seppuku and they like opened their bow, killed themselves.
Why would
for
you
their
compare
lord, you don't
this
think
to
that
just
was
no,
bravery?
bro? Don't even answer that question. That's such a stupid comparison.
He doesn't want to say hi.
Hold on.
Why,
Okay,
why is that a bad
Destiny.
comparison? They're
Because
killing
committing
themselves.
because ritual suicide killing for the honor of your fucking chiefdom or whatever is different than somebody that's like depressed and hopeless and kill themselves because they have nothing else in life going on for them.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the suicidality in Japan, you're going to chop that up to cultural distinction of them wanting to keep their honor intact.
I'm sorry, you
Right?
think people in Japan that commit suicide are doing it because they view it as seppuku?
No, I'm agreeing with you that there's at least some type of cultural distinction which leads them to think that there's at least some kind of honor that's kept intact by their suicide, be it some shame that they brought on their family.
Andrew,
I don't agree. But
You're literally like,
well,
to some degree,
what
like,
do you think the
idolizing act of
distinction?
committing suicide.
Well, what do you think the distinction is, and why do you think that there's such a high suicidality rate there?
Because they have all the
It's
things.
not masculine. It's not brave. It's not anything positive.
Yeah, I don't care about the virtue signaling. I just asked you basic logic questions.
Because I'm pretty sure, don't they have a whole bunch more predictors for things for why people would want to kill themselves? Their psychological and mental health is worse. They stay together with their parents longer. They don't move out as quickly. Their job prospects aren't as good. They're lonely. They don't, like, men don't know how to talk to women or get dates. Like, they're very, like, isolated emotionally from each other. They don't go out and talk to each other much. Like, aren't these all things that are big predictors of society?
Yes,
like,
but there's also the predictor of honor. There's an honorific which is there.
I'm sorry, show me that. Show me that.
And
Andrew.
a lot of times,
where is the honorific?
I actually can. There's left behind in suicide notes. They brought shame to their family. Sometimes it's for something as simple as not graduating high school, which are endlessly shamed for in society for doing. It's part of the honor culture which is there. You don't think that it takes some amount of follow through for the culture or some amount of bravery to do this?
No.
I think that, yeah, well, I think it does ultimately. Yeah, I think it does.
No.
Now, I'm not saying that it's optimal. I think it should be discouraged at every turn, but I think it's silly to think that men can outperform women on being able to, in their own life, if you didn't bring in that they had some kind of follow through that women didn't have on this.
I think that it all boils down to communication. And we talk about like the aftermath of what men do after divorces. I think that we don't talk about how to prevent these issues as far as like the lack of communication leading up to the divorce as to why he felt like he needed to put a gun in his mouth and end his life. I mean, men don't communicate their emotions. And Michael, you said earlier,
so here's the distinction, actually, because Destiny asked. And the distinction is the studies that I'm looking at show that in the West, it's divorce and family court for men, which is the number one kind of cited reason for these deaths, but not in Japan. That's not the case in Japan.
Yeah, because they're not even getting married. But keep in mind that it could be the same reason, right? So firstly, it's hard to figure out a reason for suicide because a guy that kills himself can't really tell you why he did it, right? Now we can look at like attempted suicide. But however, when you say divorce or marriage court or whatever, are they killing themselves because they got divorced, or are they killing themselves because they're alone and they have nobody to talk to or be with now?
Well,
so,
I think...
And so in Japan, when you kill yourself because you can't even get out of the house to find a significant other, or you're lonely your whole life, a guy that hasn't even been married might kill himself for the exact same reason a divorced man kills himself.
I mean, it's possible, but the thing is like, let's look at these distinguishing factors here. You would agree with me that we have two very distinct societies between Western society and Japanese society. When you're looking at these types of distinctions, if you're looking at the studies showing divorce, family court, and the citations there, and we also have the suicide notes left behind, I think that we can make a distinction here, that there are cultural distinctions for why people do this. And this does seem to allude to the evidence that here, the depression comes maybe from loneliness and things like that, as opposed to shame where it might come in other demographic areas. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
so
it doesn't, but the cultural differences don't really matter, because the common denominator in men committing suicide is men feeling depressed, like they have no other option. They feel too embarrassed or whatever to go and get help. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to men needing to feel less ashamed about reaching out and getting help.
So you think that this is broadly cross-cultural then, where men just refuse to do this? Maybe it's part of our nature?
I think yes.
Like it's part of our nature, maybe?
Suicide.
No, I think
it's not part of it.
I think it's a social conditioning. Like when you tell someone at a young age.
Then why would it be such cross-culture?
Angela, yeah, that's a great question. Like, why? If we look historically, men have not had the ability to communicate their feelings as well as women throughout history. So it's probably not a cultural thing. It's probably a genetic thing. When we talked before about being stoic, right? not only does stoicism something that men look to other men and say, hey, like the Clint Eastwood type of stoicism, they look at those men as being more high status. Women also reward that type of behavior, and because of that, men are less likely to share their feelings. That's just one of the reasons why. And there are probably other reasons why, but the answer is probably more. It's in a man's nature. It's in his genetics for him to not be as good at sharing his feelings as women are. Now,
right, part of the nature is that's
sure.
what I'm alluding to. Is that there must be some part of the nature, if it's cross-cultural, and you still see a heightened level among men. I would think that this would be part of something which is man's nature. Now, I think maybe it's arguable which aspects, and I don't disagree with Destiny 100% that there's not social qualifiers for this. Obviously, there are. We have the reported reasons for it, but I do think that there is a nature to men and a nature to women which is distinctly different, and part of that nature is that, I think because we have this aggressive nature, things like this, we have the follow-through for that.
And I think it's also men by nature are leaders. Men by nature are competitive. Men by nature want to have status and be on top. And I think when men don't achieve that, they are extremely hard on themselves to the point where sometimes they just give up and end it. I don't think men by nature are going to commit suicide more. I think just men by nature have take ego way more seriously and take status and all that way more seriously than women do. So when they aren't at the level, you can't
separate one from the other, Malek. You can't take that. It's like that is the essence of male. If that is an essence of maleness, you can't then just say
okay. I guess
in a
by
vacuum
nature
would commit suicide less, because they are committing suicide more and have always. That's the reason why.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess
if men and women were not in a vacuum, yeah,
you could make that statement. But I think the solution to that is just that men need to support men better and have less of an ego complex, where if you're not number one with a sports car and a hot girl by age 25 or 26, or if your wife divorces you, you don't have to end it. You can get help, you can get support. You don't always have to be number one. And I think that the competitive nature is a
but mindset. I mean, so I don't disagree with everything you're saying, but don't you think that really the outreach towards men's support is that's a pretty recent thing, where there hasn't really been any type of outreach towards men's issues, men's rights issues. Talking maybe the last decade, where it's even become prominent at all, in my lifetime anyway. So this is kind of a new thing that we're dealing with, isn't it?
It's hard to reach out for men's issues, because as soon as you start talking about it, a lot of the leaders in the men community push back against it, right? The quote unquote leaders in men's communities right now, for red pill type people, are going to tell you that emotions are gay, and they're going to tell you that talking about your feelings as a guy makes you a fucking loser, and they're going to say that if you cry in front of a girl, she's going to leave you instantly. On that Fresh and Fit unofficial subreddit, half that subreddit spent 2 weeks roasting Myron because he cried a little bit when his YouTube channel got demonetized, which is probably one of the most traumatizing things that he's probably ever experienced in his life. So it's not surprising that it's hard to talk about these issues when either women have to talk about them, which, let's be real, as men, we don't want to hear women talk about our experiences, and then when we look to men to talk about them, they basically say that we're weak or pussies or losers or whatever for having emotions.
Wait a second. Let me push back a little bit on this, because I think that that's an absurd statement. Okay. I think that all of those things, stoicism and these types of things, that is good advice from these red pill leaders. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. When we talk about these things, they're roasting these guys incessantly for crying and this kind of thing. I think it's because we've been told that it's not okay for us to lean into our nature. So it's not okay for us to be stoic. We need to be more emotional, things like this. And that's where the lack of support really comes in, is from society at large saying, no, you need to not be so masculine. You need to not do these things. That's my counter to that, Destiny.
Well, but it seems like the hyper masculinity is part of the problem. That your refusal to talk to somebody or open up to somebody, be vulnerable to somebody about a problem, seems to be a big issue. Where the number one
toxic masculinity, you mean?
Yes, yeah. It seems like one of the biggest predictors for being suicidal, even in Japan, is being isolated and depressed. Or I'm sorry, being isolated. There was another word I was looking for, but it's not that. But being isolated, yeah. That if you have nobody in your life, you're fucked, and that's going to be one of your big predictors for actually killing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I get also, that's a predictor, but don't you think though that as the light has been shined on these men-specific issues, these are more tailored towards men, that as kind of these red pill leaders, who I don't agree with, a lot of what they say. I come from a Christian standpoint, but I do agree with a lot of the descriptions that they make of these problems, that it is actually okay for men to embrace this kind of stoicism. It is okay for us to be masculine, not talk about our feelings, things like this. Isn't it really societal pushback which is causing that? Saying, no, you need to. You know, it's not okay for you to be this way. It's not okay to be a man. It's not okay to be a masculine man.
Well, because
like,
what you're talking about is literally the things that drive a lot of guys to suicide. I can't talk about this. I got to be a man. I need to man up. I shouldn't be upset about these things. I should just figure it out on my own. Like, that seems to be the problem.
Yeah, but
let's also let Michael get a word in after you're done.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say before when we think about people who lived 50,000 years ago, their daily routine was basically not quite on the level of starvation, but they're on a survival scenario all the time. There's no money. Status is basically based on how much they can provide for their tribe. In those type of situations, depression doesn't creep in because their life is either survive or die. And so you have those situations over and over again when those people don't have time to sit there and be introspective and look at other people on social media and compare themselves to cars and other people's girlfriends, et cetera, et cetera. Every day is kill the gazelle or family dies.
Wait, hang on. There's a problem here, though, and this is why I'm giving the pushback that I'm giving. Why do you see the suicidality rate so low in the 30s, 40s, 50s, things like this?
I think we're closer to survival.
As it's accelerated. And no, this was not a survival tech. You know, we weren't hunting gazelles in the 50s. This was not at all. And yet you see those rates significantly lower. Don't you think that this is because it was actually okay for you to be toxic or part of this toxic masculinity, that was viewed by society as being all right instead of all this pushback against it?
I don't know. I think you still are closer to a survival scenario before the advent of broad spectrum antibiotics in the 1930s. So like that's why I still think.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 50s.
Okay, in the 50s, maybe things are definitely a little different, but we're still an agrarian culture until like maybe after World War II. And so I think in those situations, when you're in a situation where I got to get up and work every day, I don't have time to compare myself to other people. I think as time passes on, once we get to the 1950s, we have the advent of television around 1953. And then later on, we get into, we start comparing ourselves to other people. I think that's where the depression starts to happen. Usually when you go back and look at Dunbar's number, Dunbar's the anthropologist who had this idea that human societies were always 150
Yes,
people.
I might agree with some of that, but again, the pushback is, even if that's true, if it's the advent of television and communication, isn't it a pushback on the ideas that you have and the masculinity that you hold and things like this? That's bad. Isn't that the pushback you're talking about?
Sure.
By the advent of these things?
That could be it too, but I also think like it's not necessarily like people going around and being like, I need to be more masculine and more feminine or talk about my feelings. I think it was one of the things that I've noticed is that when I went to basic training, all the things I cared about before basic training.
What branch were you?
Air Force. When I went to
that's not basic training.
I went to OTS. When I was in OTS, I remember. Well, how about this? Survival school. I went to SEER school where they beat you and they throw you in a jail cell and they keep you up for a couple of days. When I'm in those situations, one of the things I remembered was I didn't care about.
Is that pararescue?
No, I was. It's Spokane, Washington, at Fairchild Air Force Base. It's SEER school, survival, evasion, reconnaissance, and escape.
I thought that was a prerequisite for pararescue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is. It is a yeah, correct. Okay. There were pararescue guys in our troop, in our class.
Okay,
that was back in 2004. So anyway, in that situation, I noticed all these things that were in my mind, all these weird thoughts about how do I look, and I didn't care about how I looked. I didn't care about how I smelled. I didn't care about talking to women. I didn't care about what TV show was on. I was back into
because those are okay. Scenario. It was all okay, right? It was pushed that you should be that way.
Because I had 3 square meals and a place to sleep, so then I could go previously and then debate who owns Twitter or who the next president is. When I'm in a survival scenario, all I care about is surviving, getting away from pain, finding a comfortable place to sleep, and finding food. And the majority of human existence was that.
Yeah, but wasn't the culture based around embracing your masculinity and embracing what are considered broadly now to be toxic features? That is part of military culture. And so, of course, if that's the case, as you see this, wouldn't you agree with me then that a lot of this pushback maybe comes from all of this telecommunication and things like this pushing back against your nature?
What he's saying isn't like has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with anything relating to this topic. What he's really saying is like on a broad level that like if you're in the rat race like every day and you wake up, you work, you do your shit or whatever, it feels like really depressive thoughts relating to suicide. These are things that settle in when you've got a whole lot of free time and a whole lot of other people to compare yourself to, and then a whole lot of life to compare your shit to. So for instance, like again, a lot of people think that the highest suicidality is among like teenagers. It's not. It's like old men. It's men that are sitting at home. They might not be working anymore. They've got no family anymore, and they're just alone and bored and want to kill themselves. But that if you've got shit you're doing every single day, it's harder for that to set in.
Yeah, well, I get the argument that, hey, if you're not thinking about anything except whatever the pressing needs are, you're not going to be thinking about suicidality. I get that. I understand that. What I'm talking about is even in the 50s, people had plenty of free time. So why was the rate so much lower? I think that there must have been some kind of cultural pushback.
I think back then in the 50s, men could not just have free time. Like, society has made everything so
they did have free time.
Now, like,
they had recreation time.
Obviously, they had some free time. But nowadays, you don't even need to fucking grocery shop for yourself. You can get shit ordered to your house. You don't have to drive. You can Uber. You can Lyft. You can do whatever. Like, society has made it where people can be as lazy as they possibly want to. It does come at a cost, but you had to do a lot more back then. Like, you had to, like, leave the house if you needed to get food. You today can just sit in bed all day and fucking run and order food to your house. And I think the more you are doing absolutely nothing,
and then you could have milk delivered to your front door. I just don't feel like this is a good argument.
I think there's probably a lot more markers to success.
No, well, you said people were just as lazy back then as they are today, and I'm saying that's not true.
I broadly think that that's true.
That's probably true, but I don't think it's about laziness. I think one is free time, and the other is like comparisons to other people. I think that like if you go way back,
right, so the technology pushes that, though, right?
Yes,
don't you think?
Yeah, the technology and like the lifestyles that were sold. Like it feels like broadly speaking, it like prior to. Prior to like what, the 70s or 80s, like basically like have a family, have a house, like you do okay, maybe get like the coolest whatever the fuck car was being made back then, and like that was it. But now it feels like you've got social pressures that are pushing you every single fucking microsecond of the day, comparing you to every single other person around the entire fucking world, right? Like my guess is probably in like the 40s and 50s, the average girl wanted to be as cool as like the best flapper or whatever the fuck they were called at their local dance school or whatever. Whereas now, like every single woman wants to be like the Kardashian or the Kylie Jenner or not even fuck. I don't even know what the fuck the celebs are because I don't follow that shit. But like people are comparing themselves.
I appreciate that. We're coming to you live.
Yeah, people are comparing themselves like on an international level more than they ever have at every single fucking moment of their life. Like a 15-year-old girl knows what the prettiest girl in the world looks like, and she's on her fucking phone in front of her every single fucking day. You know, and it's like that type of pressure and stress. And same thing with men too, right? Like the average man, like who did the average man look up to? It was probably fucking comic book heroes in the 50s and 60s. And now the average man sees Andrew Tate as 75 Bugattis, 76 bitches, and 77 houses, and he's like, holy shit, I'm such a fucking loser, you know? Yeah.
Destiny.
Yeah, so you would say that, so then Destiny utilizing that then.
It's actually 77 Bugattis, just get that right.
Well, Destiny, it's like going with that then, you would say then it must be this kind of push towards societal materialism, which is problematic and definitely a massive contributing factor, right?
Yeah, it is, but that push, kind of like how I said earlier, society is gearing itself towards higher and higher IQ. It's probably gearing itself towards higher and higher EQ as well. You have to be able to resist more emotionally and psychologically, which men aren't equipped well to do, because traditionally men are equipped to work a job, get a woman with your paycheck, have sex, and then just that's kind of all you have to do as a guy. And the society is leveled up to where you need to be able to do way more mentally and emotionally, and men don't have the training for that because our fathers didn't do it, so they can't teach us to do it, and men don't really like to learn those things from women, so you're kind of just fucked.
Well, wait a second. Though those societies were dealing with global war and all sorts of things we don't have to deal with at all, where people were coming home in body bags. They were definitely dealing with significant trauma, and significant emotional problems that we don't even have to deal with now. I'm not so sure that that's the answer, man.
So this is gonna sound really cold, but I think in a really roundabout way, I think wars aren't the worst thing for your society. I think wars in some ways can even be positive.
You've got
Destiny. No, I'm saying that you've got a common enemy everybody goes out and works. Everybody's got like a thing to build towards. Like it drives you forward to have an enemy. I think that being at war with somebody, and even if people are dying, and even if it's horrible on a descriptive level, being at war with somebody, I think, is a lot more mentally and psychologically endurable than every single day you wake up and you look at your cell phone and you see how poor you are, you see how many bitches you don't have, you see how much your job sucks, you see how many student loans you have, you see. I think that's way more mentally grating.
But wait a second, no. I mean, you're seeing your buddies getting shot, going home.
Stop. I'm not talking about an actual veteran with PTSD. Most people in the United States did not fight in World War II.
Yeah, but almost nobody was unaffected by it. I mean,
no,
it was still your brother died.
Most people didn't have a brother die. Yeah. I'm saying that most.
Andrew, I think you're missing the point.
Your son died, or your friend had sons who died. Things like it was definitely a hugely traumatic experience.
Yes, and for the people that it was affecting directly, those people probably had way higher suicide rates than anything today, right? But my guess is a military veteran that deployed into Normandy or whatever, or any other theater in World War II, probably has much higher suicidality rates than the average population today. So those people were affected negatively.
Sure. And like Audie Murphy wrote in his biography that he had nightmares about this and this type of thing. So I agree with you in this aspect. However, it seems again like if we're kind of focusing on this and saying war even takes your mind away from the potentiality of thinking about suicidality and this type of thing, all roads seem to lead back to materialism being the primary problem here.
Yeah, but we're not getting rid of materialism. So now we need to learn to mentally equip ourselves for it.
You can actually get rid of, you can't get rid of materialism, but you can draw back, and here's how you can do it. Religion teaches against materialism. Now, it doesn't state emphatically that you can have no material gains, but the whole point here is to have some discipline against materialism. That seems like it's the answer. There's no other answer except religion to counter materialism. What would a secularist say against materialism? They have nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think that's all bullshit. I think that people in this day and age are just spoiled people who don't know how to express themselves in their whole position in life. I think that we're enjoying all the modern day perks of technology and the accessibility to each other's. And I think that women have always expressed themselves. They've always been emotional, whatever we can say. I think that men have emotions. They just choose not to express them. I'm not saying expressing them just to pander to each other, but I do think we need to find more solutions as to why you feel this way. Or maybe surround yourself with people who have some sort of discernment to how you feel and can help you go through whatever it is you're going through, between it's a man in your life or a woman in your life, your family. I think that possibly back in the day, like I said, I think that if you're too busy building America, you don't really have time to sit here and think about how all the people on Instagram are like filthy rich, and that may be just your perception, but that's not the reality. And you don't know that if you're not talking to someone about that. And I think that a lot of younger people are just on their phones scrolling and comparing themselves to people on social media. Although they complain about it, they enjoy the hell out of it. So I guess it's a double-edged sword. Did I lose everybody?
No. We're all here.
Angela, the only thing I would push back on is when you said people are spoiled. That is kind of Andrew's point, right? That is like maybe the part about people not talking about their feelings as much. You may disagree with him, but I actually agree with this concept. Like, we've lost the ability to feel gratitude because we're constantly exposed to things that are outside of our reality. Like the prettiest girls in the prettiest photos that have been face apped, and they use Facetune, and people having Lamborghinis that they don't actually own that make us feel incredible amounts of FOMO that we were not evolutionarily designed to feel, cause us to feel massive amounts of depression. And another way to say that is we're spoiled, because if we were in a scenario where we had to live hand to mouth every day, we would not have the luxury of even being of worrying about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think that with all of that, it always gears you to want to do better in society. So I don't think it has to be to the extreme of you feeling like you can achieve those things, but you should want to at least, evolve.
So there is a balance, but social media does not provide that balance. Social media goes way far in one direction to show you incredible levels of what's it called, wealth and opulence.
Shit you'll never have.
Right, and that's why you have a sense of community with your friends, your family, whoever is next to you. So
you're right. Yeah.
Check yourself and your friends and family. which is what men don't do. You guys just go fishing and just stare at the water. I think that's a big issue.
But hold on. But
I
I think fishing.
We do what? We go fishing and just stare at the water.
Fishing and stare at the water isn't the problem. Fishing and stare at the water is probably going to keep you from committing suicide. Fishing and staring at the water
argument?
promotes gratitude. It promotes gratitude.
That's how low the bar is. Because, like, for example, if you go fishing, you talk about, like, listen, my wife hasn't fucking unloaded the dishwasher in 3 fucking weeks. And you're like, why?
Is that what you think we do when we go fishing? Let's do a live stream. Me, Andrew, Destiny, and Alex go fishing.
Fishing. No, listen. There is some relaxation to fishing, and
Fishing
it's true.
There
is waiting, but fishing has nothing to do with fish. It has to do with beer drinking and camaraderie.
I know everybody hates this because maybe y'all don't like fishing, but let's say, like, hypothetically, you have some issues in your life and you go fishing. You just stand there and you can just stand in silence. That's how low the fucking bar is for men. That you sit there. The issues are still there. It's like drinking, doing drugs, having sex.
Okay, but some women do their makeup at 2 a.m. for nothing. Like, it's
fishing and having sex.
Why are we hating on hobbies?
No, but
fishing and having sex are good.
Okay, hold on. Okay, she chose the worst example, but the point that she's making is true, and that, like, this is what it feels like. Okay, and I think it's been true in anything I've seen, and maybe for some of you it's not. But it feels like if there is a woman and she's about to do something dumb or make a bad decision, it feels like every single woman in her life is about to give her a whole bunch of reasons why, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Like, you seem like you're in trouble. Like, what's going on? Like, let's talk about this. And men will literally kind of like sit by and nod and smile while their other men like are the most self-destructive motherfuckers in the world. It seems like we have a much harder time calling out, and I don't mean call out in like a woke way. I just mean like telling a guy like, hey, bro, you need to like wake the fuck up. Like, you're destroying your fucking life right now. It seems like men are more willing to let other men walk off cliffs and be like, hey, he's doing what he's doing, good luck.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but isn't that part of the nature of men?
I don't think it has to be.
Isn't that part of the nature of men to take risk? Yeah, well, I think it does have to be. I mean, the jobs, these very jobs that we're talking about,
we're not on jobs anymore.
working online, things like this, working as a lineman for the power infrastructure, you have to take risk.
We don't.
Being risk aversive is not good for men.
Every single man can learn to have a conversation about how they feel. Even people that work on lines, even people that are police officers, every single guy can learn that. It's not that hard.
But what does that have to do with what I'm saying? Even if they can have a conversation about how they feel, that doesn't mean that they can necessarily mitigate the risk the same way women can.
Because that's part of mitigating the risk. The first step is being able to talk to somebody. Most men don't even want to do that.
Yeah, but when you're talking about
one of the reasons why men live longer in marriage is just because they're too stubborn to even go to the fucking doctor, and their wives make them do it, and they get longer lifespans for it.
Well, actually, I think that if a man's woman dies, he dies shortly thereafter, whereas women live a much longer life.
Yeah, because men aren't the best for women all the time.
No, that's not the case. I think that it's a heartbreak issue. That's what they're looking
Sure, we can call
at.
it. I'm just saying that men that are married have so many better outcomes.
This, when you're talking about risk, men have to take risk, whether they talk about taking the risk or not. It's no wonder that when men talk to other men, they don't mitigate them from taking risk, because we know we have to do so. You have to take risk.
No, this is so stupidly reductive. I don't know why you make this so reductive of everything. It's not about taking risks. Sometimes guys
I'm getting to the core of the argument.
Okay. It's reductive to the point of absurdity. Like,
how is it absurd?
It's absurd because when you see a guy making a bad choice or a stupid choice, you're like, bro, you need to stop, or this behavior is not good. You need to call it out. You don't need to. It's not subjective. If your friend is addicted to fucking crack or something, no guy is like, well, it's intrinsic in a man's life to take risks.
Those are outliers, bro. Those are outliers. When you're talking
that's exactly what we're talking about. Things like substance abuse. No, hold on. Drug abuse and substance abuse are like one of the big things associated with like fucking suicidality and shit.
Yeah, sure. But if your friend comes to you, on the other hand, like with women who say, look, I'm unhappy with my relationship and my job, they might get all kinds of support saying, look, you don't need to really take much risk, stay where the safety zone is. Whereas if men go to their male friends and say, look, I'm thinking about starting a business, okay, and I have X amount of money saved, and that's what I'm going to do. It's highly risky. I'm talking. It is highly risky. And their friends are going to encourage them to do that, whereas women often will try to retract, say you shouldn't do that. You can look at the trends and see this for yourself. Women often will gatekeep that and say, don't take risk. They're not risk takers. Men are the risk takers. It's not just with drugs, Destiny.
Okay, unless you're all risks are not the same. The risk of starting a business does not mean that you have to risk dating a girl with BPD who stabbed 3 men. But a woman will go
You're
on a
smuggling
date.
that in.
Stop using debate bro terms. Just listen to what I'm saying instead of being obsessed.
I
You're
am
smuggling
listening.
in. You're banging the just
I've been
listen to what I'm
listening the
saying.
whole night, but
Listen
I
to
don't
what I'm
want you to
saying.
straw man me.
I'm not. Nobody's.
That's all.
Your argument is that the same type of risk that makes a man start a business is the same type of risk that makes him make any other number of stupid decisions in his life.
It's not my argument.
I'll repeat it. Andrew, nobody understands your argument. I don't know. I'm too stupid. Sorry.
Except everybody who does.
Okay.
But
right.
listen, I'll repeat it.
Can anyone else on this panel summarize the argument so I messed it up? I want to hear if anybody else got it. I'm sorry.
I bet you Sartain can.
Okay,
I bet
okay,
you
Sartain. Yeah, so Sartain, tell me. So Sartain,
right,
it sounded to me.
too fucking annoyed at his fucking voice to even listen to what he's fucking saying.
Nice. Sartain, so what it sounded to me like what he was saying, and you tell me what he was actually saying. It sounded like he was saying, you can't tell men that you can't take risks on, say, crazy women or crazy college decisions because men are risk takers naturally. And if men are going to encourage each other to do things like starting good businesses, they're probably also going to watch men take other risks that might equally be bad. That the risks, good and bad, are part of being a man. That's what it sounded like he was saying. But apparently that's not at all what he was saying. So can you explain to me what he was saying, please?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him, but I think it's a spectrum, right? Like what you said before about people over the age of 30 who are like trying to tear their friends down. Some people are just bad people, and some people, and like what he said, what Andrew said also is the concept of, do men need to take risks in order to provide more so that they're more attractive to the opposite sex and so that they're useful to men? Yes, they have to be able to do both of those things, but yeah, I don't want to put words in Andrew's mouth. I kind of understand what he's saying, but what it feels like
it sounds like he understood it fine.
Nobody understood. Oh, right. It's kind of like it's kind of hyper. Hold on, but what Andrew's saying is a little bit hyperbolic. It's like all the time we always have to take risks. The reality of the situation is men can. Destiny, because I'm in the military, because I was in the military, we had this thing called 22, I forgot it was 22 push-ups or whatever. And we did 22 push-ups every day for the 22 men that committed suicide every day in the U.S. military. It was a serious problem for people in the U.S. military. And so what we did is we tried to enforce a culture where when somebody in our troop, when someone in our unit was considering committing suicide, we would try to get them as much help as possible. What we do, like for instance, my coaching program, we turn the recording off, and we let guys tell them a story. It's usually a story having to do with divorce, getting cheated on, or losing custody, or losing a lot of money, or stuff like that. I think both things can be true. Men in their nature can be more stoic, take more risks, and be less encouraging of men spreading their feelings. And at the same time, that's not necessarily a good thing because I don't want my friends to die. Like I know,
sure, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that we can take risks. I think that just because a guy tells me that I shouldn't risk smoking crack doesn't mean he's going to destroy my drive to be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, because there's different types of risks.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
When women go on dates and they bring a close friend, that close friend, literally the stereotype is she's there to validate the woman's choice of man, to make sure she's not making some dumb decisions. Yeah. A guy will see another dude go out with a fucking insanely hot chick who's 19 years old and says she wants you to fucking breed her tonight and she's got a double felony, and the guys will be like, bro, I hope you pull out in time. Fucking good luck, man. Like
why are you talking about me like this? I'm sitting right here.
It's totally the fucking opposite world. Yeah, no, I know. But I was like, you can probably be like a good guy friend and tell a guy to mitigate risk in some areas without saying you've got to be a neutered puppy that's too scared to take any risk whatsoever in life. These two things don't have to be the same.
Yeah, but what we're saying is that there's a conflation, which I think happens culturally, where because we are the risk takers and the pushers of risk, that when other men do risky behavior, we're less inclined to push back on it. That's my whole point.
Yeah, I think we're arguing like degrees here. Like I think both things can be true. I think you can have a subset of men that is highly competitive and does not see any weakness whatsoever, and then we can have a normal reactions with, like, again, my father was very stoic, and then near the end of his life, we got much closer because walls had to come down for the betterment of our relationship. Both things can be true. That's all I'm saying. It's like life is a spectrum. You know what I'm saying? The other thing I would say this is when I would deal with like the SEER instructors, when I was going through SEER schools, I was going through airspace and basic course when I was in the military. Upon training, they treated me like shit. They treated me like I was lower than dirt. At the end, they greeted me like I was one of theirs, and we were able to share commonality and camaraderie as service members. And so that's one thing that happens, is that a lot of times men have to earn the respect of other men, and then they can share in some of these commonalities. But it's it's a very complicated subject, and it's not just one or the other.
Let's let Malek say something, because I think she had her hand raised for a while. Go ahead.
Oh wow, I'm still in this debate. That's cool.
You're still.
Yeah, I honestly, my brain fucking rotted from listening to that. But no, I was gonna bring up a point that I don't think anyone's fucking touched on. And it's the fact that in today's society, porn is so fucking normalized and porn fucking rots people's brains. And especially with like OnlyFans and Fansly and all this shit now, all these men are idolizing these women, spending all their fucking money on these women that they'll never get to be with. They're fucking depressed because they'll never be with a woman like this. They watch porn all day. They jack off all day. They do fucking nothing with their life. And they get themselves into this massive depressive state, and they're not gonna fucking talk to their friends. Oh, I'm addicted to like porn and I jack off all day and I spend hundreds of dollars every single day on all these fucking OnlyFans girls, and it makes them depressed, and then they just ending up offing themselves.
Right.
Like, I think
so
porn,
porn
didn't exist.
Most guys don't know off themselves, but yeah, I understand your point.
Yeah,
but I think that's like part of the like drastic increase like in depression in men is fucking porn, and like I don't know.
Yeah, so I think all of that are coping mechanisms, and we need to go down to the root of it, which is like the core family values. Where are the fathers? Where are the mothers? If we're still practicing this ridiculous tradition of men not speaking to their sons, just like, well, you know, I had to figure out how to swim, you can figure out how to swim. When in reality, they don't have to be in survival mode. Why are men still in survival mode, and why aren't other men tapping into this part of them that they are naturally not supposed to? It's not like you can't. I don't understand why we don't look at the patterns of how that's affected you as a human being, as a grown-ass man, to look like, you know what, my son doesn't have to be bitch made, but he's also not gonna be a cold motherfucker. So why don't I just like speak some sense into him instead of letting the streets raise him, or the internet raise him, or porn raise him?
Well, tell us, Angela, what is the sense that you would speak so that he had the diametric between the two? What is the perfect balance, do you think, between him being a stoic man and him being in touch with his feelings and feminine side?
Well, you got to think of it like in a workforce. Like, you may feel like you want to punch your boss in the face, but you don't tell her, like, I want to fucking stab you. You just look at her like, you know what? Not today. I'm going to figure out how to deal with this emotionally, get through the day. And you have to understand how to compartmentalize your feelings. There's a time and a place to be stoic. There's a time and a place to bash someone in the face. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, you're just re-describing the problem, though. You're not giving the solution. You're saying
that you think... The solution is understanding how to regulate your emotions. So if you feel like you want to bash
stoicism.
somebody,
so how much of that versus how much you're able to engage with these feelings and how you're allowed to be a man. This is the problem, which is fundamental. Destiny can't tell you what that is. Michael can't tell you what that is. I can't tell you what that is. It's intuitive. That's the problem.
No, that's because you're asking a bullshit question. You're saying, can you give us the exact percentage of stoic feelings a person ought to have?
Not even saying that. Like, I'm just saying if you were
99% of the questions that you ask on this panel are literally unanswerable, and then you walk away acting you've made a point. What would society look like if every man decided to oppress every woman? I don't know. We can't even decide. We can't even think of a counterfactual of that society. So no, when you no one is spurging. I'm trying to explain something. You're asking questions. You ask her, what is the exact level of stoicism that somebody needs?
Argument.
No,
it was her argument.
Her argument was not that you need an exact level of stoicism. The argument was that the level of unemotionality or inability to grapple with or healthily process emotions right now on men is too low. That's the argument.
So tell me where it needs to be then, Destiny, since that's her argument.
47.9%. Right now it's at 22.8%. It needs to be at 47.9%, Andrew.
Troll it. Don't give me the answer because you don't know it.
I know, I'm telling you. It needs to be 47.9%, Andrew. 47.9%. That's exactly the answer.
I just said it's unknowable. There's nothing I said which was wrong. I'm pointing out the critique to her argument, which is very simple.
It's not
a critique. No, let me finish. The critique was very simple. She said the problem is that we don't know how to match the stoicism between whatever her feminine qualities are for what she thinks that a man ought to use in order to process their emotions. What is that supposed to look like? I don't know. You don't know. Michael doesn't know. It's intuitive. It can't be anything but intuitive. And you just basically affirmed that that's true.
I did not affirm that that's true. The problem
what is it?
If you want to use the debate bro terms, and what you're doing is you're engaging in a continuum fallacy. You're saying that since I can't tell you exactly when the individual bits of sand become a pile of sand, that piles of sand don't exist. If you want an exact answer, on what it looks like when men engage more healthily with their emotions, you could look at the speech that Mr. Rogers gave in front of Congress, where he says maybe some of the drama that we can show young boys on TV aren't two people fighting each other to the death like in Power Rangers or G.I. Joe. Maybe it can be two boys working out their emotions when they're trying to learn how to share toys on the playground. Or maybe it can be a boy talking to a teacher about how upset he is that his mom or dad said something mean to him. Those would be concrete examples of how to help people work through emotions, because little girls get that kind of emotional training and little boys don't. They're just told to go outside and run it off.
So it's intuitive?
Nothing about what I just said was intuitive.
It is intuitive. The only reason that you're
you have
expressing...
nothing to say. You're not even engaging.
I'm literally giving you a counter argument.
Giving
you a counter argument.
Can you tell me what I just said?
Don't cut me off. Let me give you the counter argument.
Can you tell me what I just said first?
You said one of the ways that you, as a man or as a woman, could give an expression for how you can reconcile both of these feelings for both stoicism and the proper amount of aggression versus the proper or non-proper amount of aggression. And you gave these anecdotal examples. Am I wrong?
You're wrong. They're not anecdotal examples. You asked me specifically for how would you address
anecdotal?
Because giving an example is not an anecdote. You fucking retard. What do you think that means? That's not an
examples were anecdotal.
No, they were examples for how to deal. That's not an anecdote. An anecdote is a story that's happened in the past. A hypothetical example
Which is what you just gave me was two stories that happened in the past.
That's not an anecdote. If I say,
you just described it as being one.
No, if I say, hey, how can I help? How can I discipline a student in the class? You go, well, you could give the student detention if he misbehaves. You go,
sure.
Oh, well, that's an anecdote. That's not an anecdote. Do you know what an anecdote is?
Okay, backing up. Try to understand that I did give you your argument back. If your criticism is that you don't believe that it's anecdotal, fine. I'll cede the criticism. I don't care. But moving into this, you say that I'm engaging in a continuum fallacy, but she's the one who gave the argument. All I did was point out as a criticism to the argument, look, if you are not able to give us this precision, which I don't believe anybody on the panel can, then this would have to be intuitive. How is that wrong?
Because that argument, that is a non sequitur. Just because you can't precisely pinpoint...
How's it a non sequitur?
I was literally just explaining it before you so smugly repeated the question when I was answering the question. I know, I understand. I know. In between huffs of your cigarette, it's all you can do. Okay? Just because you can't...
Is be right?
No, it's be smug and think you're right. The idea that just because... I know you think you're right, Andrew. That's typically how it works. Thank you. Yes. The idea that just because you can't precisely pinpoint how to deal with a problem means that the problem must be intuitively dealt with or it can't be dealt with is a non sequitur. That's not true.
I didn't say only. I said in this particular instance, yes, it must be intuitive, unless you can give me an example of how it couldn't be.
I just gave you two examples of how you could deal with it, and you call them anecdotes.
Hang on. Both of those examples don't actually give us anything on the range of spectrum, though.
How do they not give you something on the range of
spectrum? Why is that relevant, Andrew?
You say that Destiny's intuition says that these are good things to do.
No, I mean, if you're going to be hyper pedantic, we're all speaking from our
intuition. That's not pedantic.
No, it is pedantic because you're saying because Andrew just gave his intuition on what Destiny's intuition was.
I agree. That's true.
No, that's reductive and pedantic and pointless. All of us are giving our intuition. We're subjective humans speaking about our own personal perspectives. They're all
right. So if you make this argument and I point this out, then it's fair for me to point that out.
No, it doesn't matter. Like, you're pointing out nothing. You're
not saying anything.
Like,
actually, no, I am. I'm saying something
you're
which
giving
is
you're actually
here.
giving me brain
Let me help
rot
you.
Because you're arguing
Let me help you out. I can help you.
Irrelevant factor.
Like I can help you understand it better.
No, Andrew, I have a question. So if you think that men are just destined to fucking commit suicide and like it's a brave thing to do, right? It's a brave way to go. What should men do? What should change in society for men to commit suicide less, in your opinion?
I'm sorry. What was the last part that you asked?
What's the solution to the high rates of suicide in men?
I think that single motherhood is one of the #1 issues that I would take issue with. And I think a lack of masculinity and the understanding of society that men are allowed to be men is the #1 core issue here. So the kind of the argument.
No, what do you suggest the solution is?
I just gave you the solution. We want to remove single motherhood if we can. How's that? I just explained it.
Single motherhood is. How is that the solution? Like, if a man walks out or knocks up a girl and then leaves, like, that's why men are killing themselves?
And we should try to mitigate that.
Suicide?
Yeah, we should try to mitigate that.
So men should wear condoms.
And these depressive factors. Yes, that's right, Malek. That's insane. It's like you caught on really quickly to what I'm saying.
So just curious, if I look this up,
suicide solved.
If I look this up, is the biggest predictor
women and leaving them.
Is the biggest predictor of suicidality being from a single mom?
Why would it need to be the biggest predictor?
Is it because you're saying because she asked you what is the thing that you would fix?
He said that's the solution.
Yeah,
and you said this was the solution.
I gave you a multi-pronged answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I only heard that prong. What was the other prong?
Yeah, but you've been having trouble hearing all night. So the multi-pronged answer was
Excuse me, your intuition is I've been having trouble hearing.
That's true, but I can back this up with evidence that you can't repeat my arguments back.
Well, your intuition is that you can back it up with evidence.
And I can.
Intuitively.
And maybe you can intuitively understand them.
No.
Do you think? Maybe we can do that?
My intuition is you're not understanding me.
Is it too debate bro-ish for me to point out some of these arguments, or am I allowed to make them?
I mean, I'm sorry. Okay.
Hey,
well, I mean, you should be sorry.
Something? Can I propose something? The idea would be this, right? We would determine what are the goals that we want to achieve. So, like, let's say in this instance, we want specifically for men of this certain cohort to stop committing suicide. And so what we would do is say, okay, what are the key contributing factors? So men over the age of 40, let's say some sort of financial detriment, and say loss of child, whatever. We would say to look at these individuals and say, we either need to, one, try to do things to keep those things from happening. Like Andrew was saying, maybe keep the family together, do things to try to keep the family together. Or number two is if we see people in that certain risk group. In the U.S. military, it would happen whenever we'd see enlisted members in very austere locations like Clovis, New Mexico, or Altus, Oklahoma, places like that where there's just no women. Those tended to be the ones who committed suicide more. We would look for those people in those key groups, and then we would try to figure out a way to come to that person and say, hey, man, do you need help? We want to let you know if you need to talk, we're here to talk to you. So, Andrew, in that case, it wouldn't be intuitive. We would have we would say, this is the type of individuals that might commit suicide, and then we'd come up with a plan for those.
So I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree that would not be intuitive at that point. But
yeah,
the criticism which I had was we need to do this kind of like broad generalization. And when I ask, well, what does that look like? You don't know what that looks like. So it's just an intuitive assessment at that point. It's like, that's fair enough. I think that a lot of parenting is intuition. I think that a lot of masculine traits are intuitively imparted from man to man. I don't think anybody here would disagree with that. And so this is the point that I'm making against the argument. So when I'm looking at this, Destiny says, I'm engaged in a continuum fallacy. We recognize that that's a response to an argument given to me. There was no fallacy. It's insane.
Based.
Malek.
Okay, so Andrew, I just looked up the statistics. So the number one reason for suicide in men, 32% of men commit suicide due to work pressures. And then the second highest reason is financial pressure. 31% of men commit suicide over financial pressures. So the two highest reasons are work pressures and financial pressures, which kind of go hand in hand. Okay, it's not, divorce is high up there too, but it's not about single moms. It's not about having a kid somewhere that you don't know. It's not about.
Well, actually, your stats don't demonstrate that. So your stats,
no,
the stats that you're giving me for the number one reason that is handed for whatever this problem is, that doesn't actually show whatever the correlative might be for single motherhood, being raised in a single household. Doesn't show any of that.
What if the only reason they've got to work hard is because they've got single moms? There you go.
That would also be problematic, don't you think?
Okay, so
I don't know if that's funny to you.
Two reasons for suicide in men. If those are the top two reasons for suicide in men,
you know what you should do? You should do the head on the hands thing next. What's that? Answer the question or ask the question.
You're looking at my beautiful face. Sorry.
If those are the top two causes for suicide in men, what is the solution to reduce those pressures?
Well, the first solution is send me over your data so that I can review it, so that I know what you're saying to me is actually true. You can put it in the private chat, and then I can review it. Because the data that I'm looking at show different pressures. So there could be conflicting data here. So that's number one. And then the second thing is that, again, the response to the argument was there's not enough masculine versus feminine traits which are passed into young men, and so they don't know how to cope. My response to this argument was to say, well, if you don't know what that spectrum is supposed to be and it's intuitive, don't you think men should definitely be involved in that process? And don't you think that that's one of the primary reasons why children who come from these households do far better when they have intact families?
True.
Okay, I know Michael said that he has to go soon, so let's give him a chance to plug his channel and give any closing thoughts that he has.
Hey man, I really appreciate it. I love the fact that we have open debate on these channels. I appreciate you guys allowing me to come on here and talk. This is a lot of fun. Thank you guys a lot. I'm about to start Access Vegas on my channel. If you guys want to check me out on YouTube at Michael Sartain. I also have the Michael Sartain podcast, which seems to be very offensive and pissing a lot of people off. So if you guys want to check that out, that's also on my YouTube channel, Michael Sartain. And I did a debate. It wasn't really a debate. Ended up being too many people on the panel with Nick Fuentes. Not Nick's fault, but afterwards his followers attacked me and mass reported my account, my Twitter, and it's gone. So if you guys want to check out my new Twitter, it's at Sartain Podcast. You guys are more than welcome to do that. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys here pretty soon. Take care. Hey man, thanks again, Andrew. Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, it was
Alex,
nice
Malek.
meeting you. I hope we have conversations in the future.
For sure.
Nice
Hey,
meeting
Steven, I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Yeah, fun.
All right, take it easy,
All right, man.
Michael.
Take care, guys.
Oh wait, really quickly, I want to mention this because what Michael said has happened more time than it should. Angela recently had her Discord taken down by a bunch of trolls. So if anyone, this is the new PWF rule. I made a community post about it. If anyone is either talking about doxing someone or raiding their channel, getting them taken down, interfering with them in any way, you will be banned, permanent ban from the channel, even if it happens on other platforms. You can talk shit about people. You can say whatever you want. You can say, I disagree with you. This person's a loser. They're fat, whatever the fuck you want to say. But if it's threats of doxing or threats of like basically getting their channel taken down or deplatforming, that's not cool. So that's just the new PWF policy. All right, anyway, do you guys have any more thoughts on this topic?
No, I'm good. I actually have to get out of here pretty soon too.
Okay, let's do I got a little bit of super chats. Can you guys hang in for a little bit while we go through these?
Of course.
Okay. Sorry, what?
I said I'm good for like another hour before I have to go.
Damn.
Okay, cool. All right, let's just quickly go through these. Okay. EP games was gonna take a okay. World War II is such a cope, it was unnecessary. Okay. Love to see Andrew read Destiny. Okay, thank you. Which takes more training, an auto mechanic or a mechanical engineer? It's a nurse or brain surgeon. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, is the mechanical
That's
engineer
accurate.
a master? Or I'm sorry, is the auto mechanic a master auto mechanic?
Let's assume he is.
Okay, the master auto mechanic. I think that's the equivalent of, I don't remember if it's brain surgery or rocket science, but I'm pretty sure it's up there with one of the two.
Okay.
So hang on. So Destiny's dig there was a throwback to earlier in the debate. He's trying to say that because I claimed that there's a requisite training which is required between a journeyman and a master, which requires even more than a college education, that this is somehow a dig on me. But what Destiny fails to understand is it actually does. He can't dispute that it does because it's true. In this case, I think we probably both agree that a brain surgeon likely has more training involved in brain surgery, I would assume. But I don't know if that's actually true. I don't know if that's actually true, but I would assume that it's true.
I don't think it's true because women can do brain surgery, but women can't do construction, and men are better than women at all jobs.
No, it's straw
so
man
I think
more.
that if men
Straw man
can
more.
do construction and women can't, then women can do brain surgery and men can't. Then brain surgery must be easier than construction. That'd be my
Well,
guess.
then maybe you're a woman because you can't do construction. I don't know.
Maybe.
I was a woman who did construction, but I'm not real.
I'm trying to imagine Malek in the construction side. All right. Is it a society that is ruled by women, but all manual labor is done only by men, a patriarchy or matriarchy? Why all the focus on enforcement? Interesting question. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I'm sorry, Destiny, if you want to go first, you can.
Oh no, I didn't understand the question, so go ahead and answer it, and then I'll understand it even
Okay.
less.
Gotcha. I know it's all incoherent and debate bro-ish, but what he's asking is actually a good fundamental question. The reason that I focus on enforcement is because it's a baseline. So we're looking at a baseline for egalitarianism, and the question is asked, why can't men and women be equal? And we are looking at an enforcement differential, and that's why I think that they can't be. So even then, even if women were doing all of the manual labor, the enforcement would still, even if women were, the enforcement would still be male, so it would still be a patriarchy. I just don't think that there's a good way logically around that.
Okay. Someone said this: all construction, police, military, logging, fishing, mining, blah 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 blah, is 90% men. Any thoughts on this?
Brave.
Men are better at it than women are.
Well, it is a
brave job
option of not only bravery, which is part of it, but the fact that they're actually physically structured to be able to do jobs like that, which women are not.
That super chat's just fucked.
What?
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 I said the current super chat is just fucked.
In around 1960s, women used to dress like Nancy Sinatra. Plus, they can be literally killed for taking off the headscarf. Things can go back. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Things can go backwards. Okay. We made different delineations for men, but now all men just allow women to do something. It's crazy how these men that share ideology, women will side with them, making the majority, and most likely win. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. Anyone have any thoughts on this?
We make different delineations for men now, but all men just allow women to do something. It's crazy how things. What?
That's written in a very.
I'm also confused by the super chat. Maybe it was just worded poorly.
I think what
it's just
he's
like
saying,
an opinion.
I think it is an opinion. I think what he's saying is that a lot of men will just always side with women because they're soy boys or PC or because they're trying to get laid, and therefore the female ideology will always win. I think that's the point. Okay. Loneliness is at an all-time high. 60% of men are single. Most men don't have close friends. Men don't feel comfortable expressing vulnerability. The economy and educational landscape has changed. Okay, that's a statement. Men struggle with internal patriarchal standards typically don't allow that freedom of expression. Things hinder men in so many ways, which is the way in why patriarchy harms men. Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's other things to talk about, but I don't think it's the patriarchy that's harming men. Causing them to be single and depressed, but
I think he's saying that like men are the reason why men are being harmed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of, well, I guess Mark Zuckerberg is a man. He invented Facebook. But yeah, I think it's technology, poor diet, lack of exercise, lack of purpose. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. You all presume equality. What if men talking to emotion doesn't work the same as it does with women? In talk therapy, there's evidence it doesn't work as well on men. Could male expression just be different? Yeah, it's still therapy still works on men. It's just I have seen that study. It's like a little bit less effective for men than it is for women. But yeah,
clearly how they express themselves is different, and the way that they even have to physically interact with the world is different than women. There's significant differences, which I don't know why people pretend that they're not there, but they are there, and we just kind of like turn this blind eye to it. Or many, at least progressives, seem to turn a blind eye to it. But the distinctions are there, and there was a reason that all these red pill influencers are going through the roof. And it's not because all of them are saying things which are correct, but it's because they're at least addressing this fact that there's some serious distinctions, and we should probably acknowledge those.
I disagree. I think there are distinctions, but I don't think there are serious distinctions. And red pillars are absolutely not addressing any of these things. If all you needed in life, or if you think that some guy saying like go to the gym and like fucking do drop shipping is somehow like changing your life, I mean, I don't know. The idea that red pillars are addressing some fundamental thing in society and are providing some huge service, I disagree. There's a million ways.
Why do you think they're exploding in popularity?
Why do you think the Kardashians are billionaires? No, it's not because they're inspirational. It's because it's a guilty pleasure. Yeah, it's drama. It's funny to watch people shit on women. It's funny to watch somebody play
not all drama.
Masculine fantasy. All of it is drama. Of course it is.
No, a lot of them are not drama channels.
I think it also is with them being idolized.
Who's popular that isn't a drama channel?
Yeah, in the red pill community.
As far as a red pillar goes, I would say that this largely is not a drama channel.
Careful,
I'm not popular, man.
And he's not a red pillar.
Yeah. And
I'm talking about manosphere.
But the top people are only in drama because they're controversial.
Let me finish. I'm talking about manosphere content. I think that the reason it's exploded in popularity is because it is shining a limelight on some of these issues, divorce rates, single motherhood, things like this, which people definitely are gravitating towards. There's no doubt that that's true. Just like this is the pretend that I'm talking about. You just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, nobody cares. They do care. They significantly seem to care a lot about this issue.
This space won't exist. This space won't exist in 2 to 3 years because they're not helping.
Well, I don't know about that either. But there's a reason why fresh and fit, curly things are way more popular than me. What do? I've been around longer than them. What do? They provide way more drama. It's way more entertaining. There's a lot of rage porn. I generally don't do that nearly as much, and therefore.
I think entertainment's always a factor with everything. I'm not disputing that, but there's still underlying issues here that the entertainer has to be pushing. And in this particular case, I think that these issues are definitely things that men are gravitating towards. They feel like they've gotten a bad shake. I can't really say that descriptively a lot of the red pill things are incorrect. I think that a lot of their solutions are bad. I would agree with Destiny on that. But descriptively, I think they nail a lot of things out of the park, and that's why they soar in popularity.
Yeah, I mean, depends on which thing we're talking about. I think they're dead wrong about some of the things. They literally treat a relationship like a transactional encounter where some like dude is going to break into the house every week and you have to like fight him off. And that's like the main value proposition. The girl contributes sex and women don't even like sex.
I'm curious, would you say that all of the crazy like feminist shit was also like all very true and that's why it got so popular? So all the crazy Nicki Minaj songs or all the crazy Call Me Daddy podcasts, whatever these red pillars hate, were those all factual and true and that's why they got so popular?
No, but there's a distinction here. One was pushed, literally media pushed. The media pushed all feminist talking points. We can go over an entire overview of how they did so. In this particular case, these are counterclaims to a lot of those media push talking points. And I think that largely the whole red pill thing started underground. It definitely was not pushed by major media.
Tate was literally incredibly pushed by TikTok.
That's recent. And that's
look
what happened to Tate. When the system fought back against Tate, they've arrested his ass. They threw him in prison, and he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So the thing is like, look, you can say this all you want, but there's distinctions between the two. Feminism has been pushed broadly for about 100 years. It started as kind of low key before it really kicked off in the 60s, moving into the 70s, this type of thing. It has occult roots going all the way back to even the late 1700s. There's a great book written on this. It's called Occult Feminism by Rachel Wilson. You should read it. It's good.
You're recommending me books by your wife? Thank you.
Why shouldn't I?
Why would I read what she has to say if she's a woman and you don't believe that women should even like fucking be educated? Like,
no, you mean the thing that earlier in the debate you asked if I believed in and I said I did?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
And we already clarified, so now you're lying. So now you're lying again.
Well, no, actually,
how many times are you gonna lie? I wonder.
Well, that was just my intuition that you feel that way.
Well, your intuition was wrong.
Your intuition isn't my intuition is wrong, but you don't know that, right?
Well, no, I do have specific ways that I can make this knowledge claim that your intuition is wrong.
Well, you intuitively
because
think
earlier
you
went back and contradicted yourself.
No, your intuition.
No, it's not retarded. It's smart.
Claim both things that I contradicted myself on.
So the contradiction, the first thing was you said, Andrew, do you believe that women should be allowed to pursue higher education? I said, yes. Now you've brought it up a second time as though I didn't when you know that I did.
That's not true. Initially, I declared that you didn't believe it. It is true. And my intuition believes the same thing still.
No, that's
all right. Last super chat.
Can you address how off his intuition is right now, Andrew? Or I'm sorry, Alex.
I'm a moderator. I don't want to get involved in the debate.
Oh, okay.
Shout out to Michael Sartain showing up in a day in, day out, giving his personal time to help men improve their social lives. Okay. Yeah, Michael, you have a fan. Appreciate the super chat. Yeah. But anyway, those are all the super chats. I mean, like, me personally, when it comes to this debate, I kind of sometimes agreed a little bit more with Destiny. Sometimes I agreed more with Angela. On certain things, I sort of agreed with Andrew. So I'm kind of like in the middle between you guys. Okay, we have...
never agree with me. Okay.
Damn.
Yeah, you're totally different when it comes to debates than what comes to speed dates. You're like hardcore, like right-winging, Trump saluting, like fucking Malek.
Jeez.
But
I don't Trump salute, but maybe one day.
We got so Katie wanted to come on and I think debate Angela on a few things. You guys mind if I let her on?
I have to actually get rolling, so I'll just do an outro if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Andrew Wilson. I'm the host of The Crucible. Thank everybody on the panel for the spirited conversation. I don't hold any grudges for conversations like this. Never have. And appreciate all of your guys' time. You can find me there on YouTube. And with that, I'll get out of here. Have a great night.
Take it easy, buddy.
Bye. Good meeting you, Andrew.
Also, my wife's book is great, Destiny. You should read it.
All right. Andrew's wife has a good book. That's the takeaway. All right, let's bring on Katie. Yeah, so you want to talk about something with who? Angela?
Malek. I'm very upset
okay.
with you.
Hey, Katie. Missed you.
Hi.
What you got?
Can we also Thank God that Andrew left. Like, let's be honest. Okay.
No, I love Andrew.
No,
I actually loved Andrew, like, at the start of this debate, and like the more he talked, like the more he pissed me off. Great guy though. I thought he was amazing content.
Yeah, I'm glad he's not here because he would have completely derailed what I want to talk to you about. So here's the thing, right? So quick question, so I'll know where you stand on this. You said that you think guys, it's like their own fault that they're that suicidal or whatever, that they have rising suicide rates, right? But then in the first section, you talked about gender roles and how gender roles are important. Now, whether gender roles are because of biology or nurture, the only way we can affect how people are is through socialization. Do you agree with that? Because we can't change people biology.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. So I think that you can't both support gender roles that make men's life shitty and bad and make them suicidal, and then blame men that it's their fault that they're toxic and suicidal. You know, it doesn't work both ways. You need to pick a side.
Yeah,
there.
But I never said that. I never said that. I said that I think gender roles. I said that gender roles are extremely important for society. Biologically, genetically, men are better at doing certain things and women are better at doing certain things. And I think to dismiss that is absolutely stupid and will just inconvenience and make everything worse for everyone. And it's men's fault that men are depressed and not okay, because in most societies, in most fucking households, when you have a little boy, his father, all his friends, all his peers are telling him, men don't cry. Men go to the gym, men work out. If you're sad, like, hit the gym, like, work out. Men don't cry. It's gay to cry. It's gay to talk about your emotions. It's gay to be depressed. Soy boy, go kill yourself. That's what men say to other men.
Yes.
And they have no
support system. I don't know how true that is. Like, okay. I've never in my family.
With older men, it's not so much, but with younger men, like Destiny stated before, like under the age of 25, that's extremely prevalent.
I think maybe
younger man goes to another man for support.
Alex, I waited so long.
Wait, sorry, I was just gonna say this. I think maybe online that could be true in certain communities, but I think in like real life, like
no, I'm talking about in real life. I have 7 brothers.
Okay, maybe we just have a totally different
I'm surrounded by men in my personal life, and I see this shit all the time, and it pisses me off.
One, younger men are not the issue. Older men are the one who are killing themselves in droves. So whatever you want to talk about younger men, sure, it's an issue. It's not the biggest issue. Okay.
But the reason why older men are killing themselves is because their whole fucking life they were raised with this mentality that they are alone. They have no one to fall back on. They have no emotional support system. They're a man. They need to toughen up. They tried it their whole fucking life. They've made it to 40, 50 years old, and it didn't work out, so they kill themselves.
I agree with you. So here's the thing, because maybe I'm misunderstanding you. When you say gender roles, do you just mean the fact that men work at certain jobs? Because that's not what gender roles are. The reason why men and okay, so when we talk about gender roles, there are many reasons, biological and socialization wise, why men end up in certain jobs or do certain roles like leading or protecting or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And the reason why that socialization comes hand in hand with the toxic stuff that you don't like that makes them want to kill themselves. When you base an entire man's value on their ability to lead and protect, and then they fail at their duty, they off themselves, or more likely to off themselves, because now they have no value. But that is the price of the gender roles that you're supporting. That's the issue with them.
I literally stated multiple times, a lot of the issue for men's depression is their fucking ego, because they base their value on fitting into societal standards and societal norms, and I think that's extremely toxic, and men should not do that.
Okay, so
also,
we should have.
Alex, I love you, but I have to leave.
You're twisting like all of my points.
Okay, Destiny, you want to really quickly plug your channel?
Yeah, real quick. Instagram, YouTube, Kick, Destiny. Love you guys. Be careful. Bye.